The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Sunday, the 19th of November. Today,
the Chancellor is weighing up a surprise tax cut to woo voters as the election draws closer. But as Labour continues to dominate in the polls with spending and debt out of control, is this just a last-ditch bribe by a dying government? We'll have reaction to that throughout the programme.
And I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here is set for a dramatic launch tonight with GB News' star Nigel Farage in the spotlight. We are live down under.
Another manifesto promise broken, but one you might not have heard about. A Tory MP is calling on the government to honour its 2019 pledge to ban the import of hunting trophies, but it might mean a fight with the House of Lords. We'll bring you that special report.
And the days where you call the old bill and no one shows up could be over, as plans are revealed to test drones to show up to emergencies to give police information. How do you feel about police drones roaming the skies above your gaff? Let us know. gbviews@gbnews.com.
And Craig will have your latest weather forecast.
Good morning. Many of us saw some rain on Saturday. What does the weather have in store for the second half of the weekend? Find out in a little bit.
And as ever, Aidan McGee will be here with all the latest from the world of sport.
Yes, good morning. In the Premier League, we'll hear how troubled Everton could be hit with a further points deduction. And in F1, fans have filed a lawsuit in Vegas.
I'm Olivia Utley.
And I'm Martin Daubney, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Well, good morning to you all. Could we be expecting tax cuts to come? In light of the Chancellor indicating he could reduce business levies to boost economic growth, Jeremy Hunt said difficult decisions to reform the welfare state are required as he considers squeezing benefits by billions while slashing inheritance tax.
Yeah, following this, households closest to new pylons and electricity substations could receive up to £10,000 off their bills over the course of a decade under the Chancellor.
This is part of the plan to help halve the time it takes to deliver new electricity networks to 7 years.
Well, joining us now to discuss this is political commentator Alex Armstrong. Alex, at long last, Jeremy Hunt seems to have found some wonga down the back of the sofa at Downing Street. We need a tax cut, surely, if the Tories to have any chance of avoiding wipeout at the next general election. But it sounds controversial, squeezing benefits to give it to the richest for inheritance tax. Tell us more.
Yeah, good morning, both of you. And we've seen, haven't we? It feels like a return to the Cameron years where we're squeezing the poorest to hand out to the richest. Now, we're talking about inheritance tax, of course. It's been quite a controversial policy to tax people. They've been calling it the death tax. It's something that's quite commonly referred to online. And, actually only 4% of estates actually pay inheritance tax. So it's quite a small population of the public that ever really get impacted by this policy. Now, many will say that they welcome tax cuts. And, of course, we should welcome tax cuts. We do need some growth in the country if we want to avoid a recession. But we're really seeing Rishi appeal to his blue wall and completely ditch the red wall. We've seen that in recent moves. Bringing back David Cameron is a beautiful example of this, I think. But if we're really talking about what direction this government's going in for the general election, they're desperate to keep their blue wall now. I think they realise that's totally under threat. The government now, the cabinet really reflects a blue wall cabinet. So we're seeing a return to the old and a bit of a departure from the post-Brexit government, at least in policy terms. So, I think the pylon piece is interesting as well, because, if you run the numbers, Martin, you'll find that, if you live 500 metres, let's say 500 metres away from a pylon, which, is still quite far in terms of how far away you'd be from one, that's only 2.3% of households. If you get closer to 50 metres, we're talking about 0.07. So I don't really know who this policy is targeted at. And to me, it just feels like a last-ditch attempt to splash some cash, even though not many people are really going to benefit from it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it sounds like Jeremy Hunt has been listening to you, because actually on the front page of the Sunday Times this morning, it suggests that he's going to delay that inheritance tax cut until spring and focus instead on a cut to either income tax or national insurance. Do you think that's the route he's going to take? And do you think that is what he'll do? Or do you think he'll get jitters at the last minute?
Well, it will be quite a departure from the rumours that have been circulating around the Politico sphere, at least anyway. Income tax and national insurance were never on the cards, or at least will only be on the cards recently. So that may be some rumbling from the back benches saying you've got to do a little bit more than this sort of nonsense cuts that people are going to completely see through. Then the Tories do need some vote-winning policies. They haven't seemed to have got any.
The fact of the matter is, Alex, the Tories are meant to be a party of low tax. Many people feel they voted Boris and got Corbyn. When you look at the tax regime that we live under, and if the Tories don't give a tax cut, OK, with £2.6 trillion in debt, little side note there, but if they don't, they're doomed. They have to do it, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, look, this was Liz Truss's argument, right? And the reason why that fell flat and Liz Truss's high growth plan fell flat is because it went against the goals of the Bank of England, which was to drive down inflation. And we've We've heard Rishi bang on about getting on top of inflation, despite it being really the Bank of England's job to do so. But, you know, I think they do need some vote-winning policies. They need to sell the public, we're going to do something, and we're going to put some money back in your pocket rather than take it off of you. We are living under the highest tax burden. I know everyone says this, the highest tax burden since World War II. So, you know, what are we going to do if we have a Tory government that's going into an election with no vote-winning policies and having completely thrown out their red wall seats? You know, they won't have anything really to campaign for. So, you know, Martin and Olivia, I think you're both right. They need to do something, and they're running desperately out of time and out of ideas. So, you know, tax cuts are where the Tory party finds itself most comfortable. There's not a single MP. I know Liz ran a rebellion of, I think, 60 to 80 MPs to try and get to, you know, saying we will never vote for more tax rises. So they've got to do something. I mean, I don't know what else they're going to do, frankly. I think the pylon idea is a little bit mad, but you know, there we go.
OK, Alex Armstrong, I think many people agree. As Bill Clinton said, it's the economy, stupid. Politics, when it comes to elections, is all about bribery. Maybe at long last we're seeing a bit of that coming.
Well, I'm
for it. Thanks, mate. Cheers. You have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
Now, moving on, Series 23 of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Reality TV show begins, broadcast from the Australian jungle.
The show is set for a dramatic launch tonight as high-profile contestants, including Jamie Lynn Spears, the sister of pop star Britney, and our very own GB News presenter Nigel Farage go to the jungle.
And other contestants join the jungle this series include food critic Grace Dent, reality star Sam Thompson, JLS singer Marvin Humes, former EastEnders actress Daniel Harold, and Hollyoaks actor Nick Pickard.
Well, joining us now live from Sydney is GB News reporter Ben Leo. So, Ben, have you been speaking to Nigel? Is he feeling excited?
Yeah, morning, guys, from a rather hot and fairly sweltering Australia. I know it's probably dark and wet where you are in Blighty, so I hope you're wrapping up warm. But look, it's been weeks and weeks of speculation. Will he? Won't he? Nigel Farage in tonight, the opening show featuring Nigel, the £1.5 million star man, in his maiden Bush Tucker trial. For a first time ever, they've swept Nigel 2,000 miles out to the Australian Northern Territory, that's the outback to you and me, for a challenge that involved wading knee-deep in gallons of sludge and slime. Where better to watch tonight's cracking opener than the only English pub this side of the Gold Coast, the Fox and Hounds, which actually we're quite in the sticks here, really. I would invite you inside, but we are so in the bush that if we did go in, we'd probably lose signal. We've got a traditional chalkboard here. Go on, Nigel, GB News. Absolutely nothing to do with me. That was here when I arrived, I promise. Moving on to the traditional red telephone box, shipped over from London some years ago. And over here, London red double-decker bus, which came over in the 19... TV inside, all the better for watching GB News, and of course, tonight's opening episode on. Landlord Justin Hemer. Justin, tell us a bit more about the pub, and there's an interesting story to the background of this place, isn't there?
Yeah, thanks a lot, and welcome to Australia. Not quite in the bush, just where we are, but yeah. So this is originally the Sussex Arms from Tunbridge Wells in Kent. So that pub was built somewhere in the 1700s, and in '87 closed its doors for renovations. A local in the town got word of it and was able to buy the pub from the developers for off him for 3 days, cost him £8,000 for the privilege to do it, and got basically a whole team of guys on site and stripped it of everything he could physically remove. So when you go back inside the pub, you'll notice it pretty much straight away. Pews, fireplaces, doors, dividers, all the heavy hard wood items that you would traditionally find in an English pub. That's what he stripped out, put it in his backyard, sat there for 20 years. Then he decided, oh, I'm going to go to Australia, I'm going to migrate. What do I do there? Oh, yeah, that's right, pub's in the backyard. What do I do in Australia? It'll be
set one up, and you serve traditional roast, toad in the hole, sticky toffee pudding, all the favourites.
Spotted dick even. So you know we've got it all happening here.
So when Nigel does come out the jungle, hopefully a winner, you're going to welcome him with open arms and a nice crisp pint.
Oh, without a doubt. I wonder. I mean, is he a hobgoblin sort of guy or an old speckled hen?
I think he's an ale kind of guy.
Yeah, so hen it will be.
In terms of the press The Sun with a really interesting front page today. Apparently, they've unearthed some old archived tweets from Guardian columnist Grace Dent, obviously a lefty activist when you compare her to Nigel, basically taking the mick out of his near-fatal plane crash some years ago. So sparks promise to fly in the jungle in the coming days, and it's going to be an epic 3 weeks of fun and frolics for Nigel and for us here at GB News in the jungle.
Well, Ben, certainly Nigel's used to be up to his neck in slime. He worked in Brussels, so this should be a doddle for him. But listen, he's actually shortening the odds with the bookies back here in Blighty. Ben is now 6-1, fourth favourite. Have you spoken to Nigel recently, and how confident is the fella?
Thank you. All good?
Don't think he heard us. Well, anyway, we're looking forward to it. I reckon that there's loads of stuff in the papers. There's an interesting piece from his ex-missus, Nigel, and she's going to vote for him at every Bush Tucker trial to make sure that he fails. Or at least he has to eat all the horrible stuff. I think it's going to be a great series.
So do I. I've never watched it before, but I'm definitely going to this time. I don't know why I didn't with Matt Hancock. That sounded fun.
And what's really interesting is for Nigel to finish in the top two, he's 5-2, which I think is a good price. And if he gets to the final two, that is a de facto Brexit referendum. That's what's going to happen.
I can't help thinking he'll be very, very popular. Everyone who knows him likes him, so...
And I've seen him, and so have you, no doubt. When people meet him in public that don't like him because of his media personality, they're very quickly wooed by him.
Exactly.
You know, and I think it's going to be really, really interesting. I haven't watched that show in years. I'm going to tune in.
It's a funny thought to think of young people watching him, because, you know, if you're sort of 14 now, then you're a small child during the Brexit time. They won't have heard of him. They won't know what he's about.
Yeah, and that's
just warm to him.
That is why I think it's a canny thing to go in there, because the TikTok generation, as they are, that's what Nigel understands that. They either don't know who he is, or they've got this bogeyman reputation of who he is. So if they see him, you know, mucking in, having fun, getting covered in all sorts of revolting stuff and just smiling through it, I think it'll work.
I think it might well too.
All right, let's move on. It is now 6:13. This is Breakfast on GB News with Olivia and Martin. And if you're just joining us, here's a reminder of our top stories this morning.
The Chancellor is weighing up a national insurance or income tax cut to woo voters as the election draws closer.
And as we just saw, I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here is set for a dramatic launch tonight with GB News star Nigel Farage in the spotlight. We'll be live down under throughout today's programme.
And a Tory MP is calling on the government to honour its 2019 pledge to ban the import of hunting trophies, but it will mean a fight in the House of Lords. We'll bring you that report a bit later on.
And plans are revealed to test drones to show up to emergencies to give police extra information. But how would you feel about police drones roaming the skies? Let us know. gbviews@gbnews.com.
And parents should know what schools are teaching their kids about the so-called concept of toxic masculinity, say a group of MPs who've released a report saying the lessons could lead to male pupils feeling picked on.
And the government is spending £1.5 million on minibuses and electric vehicles for the prison system in Albania. This is part of the government's plan to help modernise the Albanian prison system, and it's part of a deal to return foreign prisoners. Let us know what you think about that. gbviews@gbnews.com. Get in touch on that topic. £1.5 million to prisons in Albania at a time when our own prison can't even keep inmates in, as we saw with Daniel Khalif, creaking at the seams. £1.5 million nicker going to Albania. Has the world gone mad, or is it a sensible thing to do?
It seems like the sort of thing you can imagine civil servants talking about it, and in their tortuous logical process, it probably seems sensible, and then it comes up as a headline, and they must think, that sounded better on paper.
Yeah, on the one hand, you know, if it helps us to deport violent Albanians back to their country, fine, but why do they need an electric vehicle?
Absolutely, and we're in a situation now where a few weeks ago judges were told not to send rapists to prison because the prison system was simply overloaded. There was no space at all. That is how much our prison system's creaking.
There we go. And instead, they're chucking £1.5 million towards Albania. You can probably tell what we think about it. Let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.com. OK.
And a North Devon MP has called on the government to honour its 2019 manifesto commitment and ban the import of hunting trophies. A bill has already gone through the House of Commons, but it plans to make it onto the statute book have been thwarted by the House of Lords.
Now, South West of England reporter Jeff Moody explains we would like to warn you that the following story does contain images that may be disturbing.
It's a sport not many can stomach. Hunting down wild animals in order to bring them home as trophies. The government was committed to helping end the practice, but so far not much progress has been made. Selene Saxby, North Devon's MP, says she's frustrated.
We committed to it in our manifesto for 2019, and the bill has gone the whole way through the House of Commons. It's got immense public support, and it has been blocked in the Lords by delaying tactics. So we're really just asking the Prime Minister to do what we said we'd do and get Henry Smith's bill through the House again.
It was a private member's bill led by Conservative MP Henry Smith, but 11 peers stymied the bill in the House of Lords, tabling 60 amendments in a bid to frustrate progress.
It's always difficult as Conservatives to be banning things altogether, but I think it's also, this is about conservation. These are species that we know are in decline, and we know that what's driving the trade in hunting them is the fact you can bring back the trophy. And so we know there's been 25,000 dead animals brought over in the last couple of decades. You know, this is something that isn't a small matter. And for these endangered species, it really is important.
Dilys Rowe is from the International Institute for Environment and Development. She believes banning trophy hunting would be a mistake.
Hunting provides really good benefits for conservation, particularly in terms of the amount of land that it incentivises to be kept for wildlife because of the money that it brings in. So while it seems like killing individual animals is not a good thing for conservation, actually the greater benefit of having that land conserved really is positive for conservation. Currently, in most of the places where trophy hunting takes place, there are none, very few, if any, alternatives that would bring in income for that land. So people often say, well, why can't we just have photo tourism instead? That means no animals have to get killed. But actually, hunting happens in places where photo tourism is quite often not viable. You know, quite often it happens in very remote areas where it's difficult to get large numbers of tourists to, or it happens in places that are just not attractive for tourists. I mean, tourists want to go places where they can virtually be guaranteed to see wildlife. Hunters go to places where you actually have to hunt wildlife, track it down, it's hard to find. You know, that's all part of the hunting experience. So actually some of those inhospitable areas that are not good for phototourism are the areas that are perfect for trophy hunting. So it's a great complementary source of revenue alongside tourism.
The bill is certainly popular. 82% of British voters say trophy hunting should be banned. But the chances of the government finding time to wade through 60 amendments is getting remoter by the day. Jeff Moody, GB News.
And lots more still to come in this hour. It's jam-packed. But first, let's have a quick look at the weather. What's in store today?
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to today, most of us seeing some further outbreaks of rain. There will be a little bit of brightness around, and for all, it will be mild. So as we start Sunday, probably not too bad initially across southeastern England, some brightness here, but elsewhere rather grey with some outbreaks of rain. The rain potentially heavy in places. Going into the afternoon, best of brightness probably across eastern parts of Scotland. Southwestern England actually may also cheer up as the afternoon goes on, but quite blustery, especially down across southwestern England. Could see some coastal gales from time to time, but temperatures on the mild side in the south potentially up to 14 or 15 degrees. Into the night time, it does turn a little bit drier and clearer for a time across parts of England and eastern Wales, but elsewhere, further outbreaks of rain coming and going. It's still quite blustery across many western parts, but it will be another fairly mild night to come. So into Monday, we will see outbreaks of rain spreading their way southeastwards across the UK. Probably turning a little bit drier and brighter for a time across parts of Yorkshire and Lincolnshire. That may well sink its way into parts of the Midlands and East Anglia as the afternoon goes on. But elsewhere, a risk of rain really throughout much of the day and feeling a little bit chillier down across western parts with that wind. Elsewhere, temperatures around average.
Well, today is the Cricket World Cup final. Australia face India and a huge final starting soon. GB News presenter Aidan McGee will give us all the latest. This is GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie, second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back at 6:23 and you're watching and listening to Breakfast with Olivia and Martin.
Well, it's time to go through all the latest sports headlines now. And joining us in the studio, of course, is Aidan McGee, GB News sports presenter. So, Aidan, should we start with the cricket? Cricket World Cup final. This tournament's been going on since the dawn of time.
Yeah, it has. There have been children conceived, apparently, since it was done. In fact, conceived and born. 45 days it's been going on for. We've got a final today that starts at 8:30. India against Australia. It's at the Narendra Modi Stadium. That's the Prime Minister. Yeah. The Prime Minister will be in attendance at the stadium that's named after him. So that's going to be pretty impressive. 100,000 people there. The roads are going to be gridlocked.
India are favourites, aren't they?
Without doubt. They've won 10 matches out of 10. If they go on to win it, it'll be their third World Cup victory. Yeah. But they'll also become the first side to have won it with a 100% record. And when you think about it, I mean, when you think of other World Cups that go on around the world, you don't have to win 10 matches or 11 matches to actually win it. But yeah, they are the overwhelming favourites for all of Australia's quality. But yeah, hotel rooms are something like 3 times what the value. This is a huge event in India, and it's super. And having with them beating Pakistan as well last week, that puts them in fine fettle. Anybody who's been to India would know, of course, that it's an obsession, cricket. It's just like football is here. Talking of football, Everton, the saga rumbles on. We talked yesterday about the 10-point deduction, but now could be even worse news for the Toffees. Yeah, it never rains, but it pours, does it? So, yes, we know about the 10-point deduction. Yes, that could be reduced on appeal. That has to be dealt with quickly. We touched on all that yesterday. But further to that, Matt Hughes, a friend of mine, on the back of the Mail on Sunday, left-hand column there, has said that Burnley, Leeds and Leicester all may have a case to claim compensation against Everton. So there was an interim hearing even before the punishment was handed down on Friday, where David Phillips Casey is now acknowledged that there might be a case for 3 clubs. So that would be Burnley in 2022, Leeds in 2023 and Leicester in 2023, because there were 2 relegation battles here over the course of 2 seasons, and they believe that Everton will have had an advantage as a result of their overspending, which then caused those other teams to go down.
So in terms of what the relegated clubs would be after, I mean, how long's a piece of string? Are they after the entire parachute payment or just a good chunk of
Well,
that?
no, I think it's the prize money for where, the parachute money they'll already have for being relegated, but no, it's the prize money for actually settling in the league. I mean, if you think about it for context, I mean, you're talking about £100 million per club. So if Everton are leveraged with that, in addition to the punishment they've already got...
They'll be out of business.
Well, yeah. Well, the prospective new owners at 777 are providing £20 million a month to deal with the case, but that's not even going to touch the sides when we're talking about £300 million, which could land them in real trouble. So what happens then? And it goes further than that, because you get you could be out of business. You're going to have that debt to deal with. But if you go into administration as a result, which you're inevitably going to have to do, because they're not going to be able to stump up that kind of money, then that's another 9 points deduction. So when does that get applied? Because, I mean, they could well stay up this season. Does it get applied next season? Another 9 points. They've got the stadium to pay for, of course. They've already had sponsorship issues with the Ukraine war. They've really got it coming at them from all angles. And, of course, next week they resume their league campaign, and it's going to be all about trying to get them out of that trouble.
That is a sticky situation for the Toffees, pun intended. Now, we talked yesterday again about the Formula One. Bedlam there as well. What's the latest?
Oh, goodness me. This is, well, we heard about... The race is actually underway at the moment. Max Verstappen's out in front. But as of today, or as of the last 48 hours, rather, they could face a legal action against those disgruntled fans. So we know about those fans who they didn't actually get to see any action. I think they got to see about 9 minutes or something like that, the ones who stayed, but most of them didn't go. The problem with courting America and trying to break America, and we've seen other sports try to do this, we see singers, we see bands try and do it, don't we? The problem is you're in among a very litigious fan base, and so the fact they didn't see any action means that they've filed a lawsuit via the Nevada state, and this is the wording here. They are alleging a breach of contracts, negligence and deceptive trade practices. Now, they've already paid £500 million just to get this race on. Max Verstappen said if he had his way, he would tear the entire thing down, having described it as a circus the day before. We had qualifying yesterday, Charles Leclerc out in front, Carlos Sainz, Max Verstappen as well. We're hoping we see some action, but it was all delayed, of course, by the manhole cover being released, because Carlos Sainz went over the...
couldn't make it up.
I know, he's like a pothole on the M25, isn't it?
There it is, look. It's a hole in the ground.
Yeah, I know.
That used to have a manhole cover on it, and a Ferrari car went over right and sucked it off, and it blew the bottom of the car. It blew a hole in the bottom of the car.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway,
and that's what caused the delay.
Aidan, we have to do that quick bit of pub trivia. Talk about American lawsuits. Which famous singer stopped kicking footballs into the audience because of American lawsuits?
Diana Ross.
Rod Stewart.
Was it?
Rod Stewart. Rod Stewart used to kick footballs into the audience in America, and somebody claimed their finger was sprained.
Well, do you remember what I'm talking about? Diana Ross.
That's
She kicked off the USA '94 World Cup, didn't she? She was meant to kick the ball in the net from about 4 yards, and she missed it. She went wide.
She made me look good. So, Aidan McGee, superb. See you in the next hour. Great.
Well, in a moment, we'll be discussing how a BBC reporter racked up a whopping 20,000 air miles. That's in Headline Makers next.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Breakfast, 6:31. This is Breakfast on GB News with Olivia and Martin. And if you're just joining us, here's a reminder of our top stories this morning.
The Chancellor is weighing up a national insurance tax cut in an effort to woo voters as the election draws closer and Labour continues to dominate in the polls.
I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. Set for a dramatic launch. That was terrible, sorry. With GB News star Nigel Farage in the spotlight. We'll be live down under throughout the programme.
And a Tory MP is calling on the government to honour its 2019 pledge to ban the import of hunting trophies. It'll mean a fight with the House of Lords. We'll have a special report on that a bit later on.
And plans are revealed to test drones to show up to emergencies to give police extra information. But how would you feel about police drones roaming the skies above your neighbourhood?
Parents should know what schools are teaching their kids about so-called toxic masculinity, say a group of MPs who've released a report saying the lessons could lead to male pupils feeling picked on.
And the government is spending £1.5 million on minibuses and electric vehicles for the prison system in Albania. Yes, this is part of the government's plan to help modernise the Albanian prison system and is part of a deal to return foreign prisoners. Let us know what you think about that or anything else we're talking about this morning by emailing us the usual way, gbviews@gbnews.com.
Well, joining us to go through some of the day's headlines is author and journalist Suzanne Holder and showbiz reporter and broadcaster Stephanie Tecci.
Right, let's kick off, Steph. There's only one place, you, Mrs. Showbiz.
Yeah,
I'm a celebrity.
I'm a celebrity.
I reckon it's going to be a corker.
I think it's going to be quite a controversial series. It's going to be entertaining, and I think it's going to be all eyes on Nigel Farage. It's going to be about how he gets on with other campmates as well. And I think there potentially is room for sparks to fly between him and Grace Stent, the food critic. And some tweets have been unveiled that she said in the past where she was mocking the plane crash, which Nigel nearly lost his life in. She was making fun and saying that, you know, I hope who he was saved by weren't pesky immigrants. And I think that's quite distasteful because whether you love Nigel or not, he's still a human being. But I think ITV bosses are going to love this kind of drama. That's why they've picked people who are either A, against Brexit, or people who do not agree with that kind of rhetoric that Nigel has put out there for many years. So I think there is going to be a lot of sparks that are going to fly. Today, Nigel has been exempt from some of the Bush Tucker trials because of the crash, because he's had to have reconstruction on his neck. So he's not going to be skydiving out of the plane today, but he will be in a desert 2,000 miles away. So he will be restricted on what he can do during the series.
Yeah, you wouldn't ask Nigel Farage to jump out of a plane into the I'm a Celebrity jungle, would you, after what he went through with that terrible... I mean, I remember those images, actually, of him being pulled out of the wreckage. Of that. And you forget, it was quite a long time ago now, wasn't it? Probably over 10 years. But yeah, for her, obviously, they've gone through her tweets, Grace Dent, and picked up these things. But there's other things that she said that she called the show, because she's obviously a reporter and she's quite outspoken and she's said things in the press before, but she called the whole programme puerile a few years ago and said that when she watches it, and she did say she watched it, but she said when she watched it, she closed her curtains because she felt the theme tune alone would devalue her property. So I just think that's a bit unwise to go in there when the producers can kind of make you do all sorts of things. I wouldn't like to be Grace Dent in that situation.
The problem with being a journalist is that you write everything down and it gets thrown back in your face.
And all the horrible tasks will be coming her way.
But no, it goes to show always for the right paycheck, people will turn
you just make you wonder.
And they will sign
Absolutely.
up.
I do think.
To be fair, 1.5 million, I would definitely throw all my money rolls out of the window.
I don't believe any of those figures that are kind of in there. They always kind of add a lot of noughts to things in the paper. And Grace Dent won't be on anything like that. But clearly she did have a price, and I do wonder what that... I'm more interested to know what that price is.
Well, it's probably hurting it. It'd be a lot less than Nigel's price.
Yes, it
anyway,
would.
I think it's going to be great. The betting, it's 6-1 for Nigel to win. He's now fourth favourite. I think a cheeky little bet is him to finish in the top two at 5-2. And as I said earlier, if it's down to Nigel in the final two, it's going to be a second Brexit vote. And it's just going to get everybody...
Let's not go there. Can we not go there?
It'll end up 48-52, won't it?
Right, talking about paychecks and how much are you for sale, Suze, let's talk about a tax cut, because it's the election's coming. All of a sudden, down the back of the sofa, here's a flipping great wad of cash, and they're trying to offer a tax breaks. What's the latest on this?
Well, some people will be hoping that's the case, but of course we don't actually know. What the papers are full of today is lots of speculation. So I can read you some speculation, but I can't necessarily promise you any tax cuts. But what we have got is that they are thinking of making tax cuts for low and middle earners. They're also considering the inheritance tax cut or getting rid of it altogether. But again, it's all speculation. You've got everything from they're not going to do it at all to it's going to go completely and be absolutely abolished. And we don't actually know. What we do know is that they think that Jeremy Hunt's got a bit more headroom. They're saying he's got about his headroom has grown to 25 billion before any spending measures are factored in. And also, how are they going to do all this? It's not really explained, but there is a worrying statement about, well, they might squeeze welfare payments and make cuts elsewhere. So all of that is a bit worrying. But to be quite honest, we don't know.
No.
What I'm fascinated by, and which they don't seem to be talking about at all, is these stealth tax cuts. Obviously, inflation has been rising massively, and yet the threshold at which people start paying the 40% rate of income tax hasn't changed since, I think, 2010.
That's right.
Which means that in 4 years' time, 8 million people in the UK, including teachers and nurses, etc., will be paying that higher rate of tax, which is meant for sort of rich people. Now, how is that fair? People should be so angry about this, but they don't know it's happening because that's the definition of a stealth tax.
People are angry, and I think, to be honest, there's always going to be losers in this. Like, for the government, they can't appease everybody, but they need to start thinking about the everyday man, who cannot afford to pay their bills and their mortgage. And it feels like these people have gone amiss when it comes to the government introducing these budgets. But I'm more concerned, if they do cuts to welfare, how are these people going to survive as well?
Well, I think, as I understand it, and take that with a pinch of salt, as I understand it, it's because inflation has gone down, so the amount they've allocated for benefits payments is effectively less. So it's like money they had, they were going to pay out on benefits, which now they have to pay less because it's inflation linked.
You've lost me already.
Which means they're not actually cutting benefits. They're just not giving.
And it's the same with pensions too. They'll link it to a different price.
I think that's it. Now, if anybody out there has a superior economic brain, that's almost everyone.
It's all robbing Peter to play Paul, isn't it? That's what it is, basically.
There's no real money.
And similarly, I mean, there's another story on our list to do, which is actually linked, which is the fact that nearly £100 billion worth of taxpayers' cash has gone down the drain in what they're saying is wasted money. Things like 140 million thrown away on the Rwanda migrants deal, and there's £500 million blown on post-Brexit customs inspection sites that were never used, and £2 billion, of course, on HS2, which was scrapped. Now, I agreed with the scrapping of HS2 because I do think you can throw good money after bad if you're not careful. But there's all that. So there is kind of this money there. It's how we're using it and how it's being spent, isn't it?
Very, very bad timing, I think, for the government that the Rwanda plan has been deemed illegal in the Supreme Court last week, because, of course, we're all talking about the money that's been wasted on that plan. You know, the government has sent more journalists to Rwanda than it's sent migrants
They've sent more Home Secretaries. They have sent more Home Secretaries than deportees. And, Steph, this neatly brings us on to your next story. A scoop on the front of the Express. Something a great many people in GB Newsland will be concerned about. We don't know who's coming into the country via small dinghies, and now there's a terrorism alert.
Yeah, and this is the problem with, Rishi and co being so obsessed with this Rwanda plan, is they're not actually focused on what's happening on our own shores. So the Express is saying that a manhunt is under the way after 6 suspected terrorists have crossed the Channel into Britain. They all have links to Islamist groups, and Security Service know where 3 of them are. They're monitoring them, but the other 3 have lost into the system. They're saying they've allowed these other 3 to roam in the country because they want to see if they've got other links to terrorist cells. And In total, there's about 25 terrorist suspects who've managed to cross into the country, and to me, that is 25
that we know about.
Many.
Yeah.
Right, that's what was
to be honest, I don't feel comfortable knowing that they've let these 3 suspects to go mingle in the country with other people, because for all you know, they could be planning a terror attack. And when it happens, that's where we hear that line in the news where they'll be like, security services were watching them, but it's a little too late.
But then again, if they lead them to other people and you need a wider, to get kind of make the net wider, I suppose that, I mean, that is what we, trust the security services hopefully to do. What I thought was quite interesting was in the Sunday Express, there's a resident called Kim Rye from Kent who's been filming small boat arrivals for 2 years to create a public record, and she fears there's a major threat of terrorists because she's saying that groups of men are landing and then just simply getting into waiting vehicles. And she said 2 years ago people were arrested and always searched, but one recent group of 30, none were searched at all, and she's just watching that happen.
Kim actually supplied some of that footage to GB News. I know Kim, and she's got footage of lads coming ashore in dinghies and literally charging ashore, going into people's houses, trying to find mobile phones or anything. And no one is talking about this, and they are literally living on the front line.
It just
must be terrifying in Kent. Yeah, we don't appreciate it.
Living there must be an absolute nightmare. And like she's saying, it's all young men alone. It's not families. It's not.
And yet, if you talk about it, you're racist. You're alarmist. But the fact
is alarming. It's very alarming.
It is alarming. The fact of the matter is, if we have a situation which we have, where young men can rock up without documentation, without any proof of who they are, stands to reason. OK, not all of them are terrorists, obviously, but not all of them are brain surgeons either. No. Some of them may be terrorists. That's a fact.
It's true, Martin. And this is why I'm concerned why Rishi is so fixated on Rwanda, because I'm like, we already have migrants who are here, which they're already roaming about in the country. Some of them, they do have sad stories behind why they've come here, but others, there are potential for terrorism, and it feels like they are just being lost in the system, and they can potentially get away with doing an attack in the future.
The average time to process one of these asylum claims is 435 days.
Wow.
No, it isn't.
A year.
No, it isn't. I don't believe that. Of course that isn't true. That's just ridiculous.
It's terrifying.
It's just stupid behaviour by people who should be doing their jobs properly. And that's where the core of the problem is that the people weren't processed in the first place. But I heard you talking earlier about the Albanian prison thing. But actually, I'm not upset about that, because if that's part of the deal we're doing with Albania to return people, and we do have to invest something in their prison system, yes, we do need it in our prison system as well. But I do actually get the argument that is something that is helping us, because the Albanian...
the issue is that completely, and the deal that the government has so far agreed with the Albanian government has meant that there are 70% fewer Albanian migrants coming over.
It's working.
But it's a bit of a Medusa's head. I mean, you solve that problem and you have a whole different group of people who are coming over.
That's government, that's politics, isn't it?
I wonder if actually Albania might have been a better partner in the first place than Rwanda.
I think so.
You think about it. Because,
Giorgia
Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy, has just done this deal with Albania in half the time we've been faffing around in the Supreme Court.
Like, how many times...
And they're in the European Union and the ECHR, and that's happening, happy as Larry. So how come we can't just do the same? If we're sending them minibuses, let's send them illegal immigrants into containment centres.
Like, I think to myself, how many times do the Supreme Court have to say no until we actually think, like Suella's saying, even though I don't agree with Suella most of the time, that we need a plan B, and a plan B needs to be
she's only come up with that since she's kind of not there, though. She was all a very good idea while she was there. It wasn't her dream. It was her dream to send people to Rwanda. She's obviously woken up in a nightmare.
About that.
I haven't forgotten about
Changed her tune.
She has changed it.
Well, sweet dreams there, because it's not going to happen anytime soon. Stick with us. We need to go to the headlines. So it is now 6:44. This is Breakfast on GB News with Olivia and Martin. If you're just joining us, here's a reminder of our top stories this morning.
The Chancellor is weighing up a surprise tax cut to woo voters as the election draws closer and Labour continues to dominate in the polls.
And I'm a Celebrity Get Me Out of Here is set for a dramatic launch tonight with GB News star Nigel Farage in the spotlight, and we are live down under throughout the programme.
And a Tory MP is calling on the government to honour its 2019 pledge to ban the import of hunting trophies, but it's going to mean a fight in the House of Lords. We'll have a special report on that later.
And plans are revealed to test drones to show up to emergencies to give police extra information. But how would you feel about police drones roaming the skies in your neighbourhood?
And parents should know what their schools are teaching about toxic masculinity, say a group of MPs who've released a report suggesting that lessons could lead to male pupils feeling picked on.
And the government is spending £1.5 million on minibuses and electric vehicles for the prison system, as we just said, in Albania. This is part of the government's plan to help modernise the Albanian prison system, and it's part of a deal to return foreign prisoners. Let us know what you think about that or anything else we're talking about this morning by emailing the usual way, gbviews@gbnews.com. OK, so cutting-edge plans to use drones as first responders to police emergencies will be trialled next year.
If testing is successful, the devices would be stationed on buildings and operated remotely to be sent first to scenes to give police early information.
Initial trials under a scheme dubbed Project Eagle X will take place in Norfolk, which has limited access to the helicopters flown by the National Police Air Service. Further tests will also take place in Thames Valley Police and also in Hampshire.
Well, joining us now is former Met Police Chief Detective Superintendent Kevin Hurley.
Okay.
Hi, Kevin. What do you think about this idea? I think there'll be people at home worrying that what could end up happening is that these drones are sent out instead of bobbies on the beat, and we'll just see even less robust policing in the UK. Is that a danger?
Well, first off, there aren't bobbies on the beat. There aren't bobbies on the beat to send out in most instances. But I think this is about 15 years overdue, if not 20 years overdue. What this will enable, particularly in rural areas, is for police to get a situational picture on what's actually going on at road accidents, or perhaps a case of a rave that's gone out of control, or even if there are suspects running about in a local area, then they can use that drone to direct people to catch them. So it's long overdue. But it's just an example of how sedate and conservative police leaders are in making decisions to use modern technology.
But, Kev, a lot of people will be a bit disgruntled that with this focus on eyes in the sky is at the expense of boots on the ground. You know, we've seen recently, especially with the protests in London, the police seem to be standing off. They seem to be relying on surveillance and prosecuting people after the event if you're from a certain part of the protest movement, and that's a pro-Palestinian brigade. But if you're on the other side, then they're happy to wade in. Surely the answer is more robust on-the-ground policing rather than relying on more surveillance technology.
Well, I think it's probably a combination of both. Of course, we should use the latest technological means to make sure police are deployed to the right place, and that's what drones do. And as for noise, you know, people complain about a helicopter and they're much worse. So it's a start. But turning to your point about going into essentially what you're talking about is the pro-Palestinian demonstrations. Wading into a crowd is far more difficult than it sounds when you speak about it. And that's why the police are much more circumspect and are making lots of arrests, and I think up to several hundred after the event. So the message will get out there that you can't use hate crime and anti-Semitic language. But if you go wading into a crowd, which I've done many times in the past, you often end up with a much worse situation which develops into a riot. So I do understand why some of the police leaders are the way they are. And of course, you've got another problem, which is that police on the ground, the actual people who would have to do the wading in, are actually very, very concerned about being captured on camera these days, using force, and then 2 years later being judged in, if you like, the cold light of day, that something that happened in seconds was unacceptable and they lose their job. So I think the days of that are gone. If police were to bring one piece of modern technology in to deal with unpleasant demonstrators' behaviour, I'd urge them to bring in water cannon, because, of course, it sprays them, makes them wet, keeps them distant from the crowd and puts a stop to it.
I think there'll be plenty of people sitting at home who aren't planning on committing crimes anytime soon, who don't really like the idea of a sort of police state. It's a bit 1984-esque, isn't it? These drones circling around, filming innocent people going about their daily lives. Isn't that a bit of an abuse of privacy and abuse of data as well?
Well, that's not the intention. The intention is they'll be stored on rooftops in strategic points so that if an incident occurs, police can deploy the drone to start filming and downloading the control room what's happening, so they can then deploy police more sensibly to go into an incident. So let's say it's a burglar's been disturbed from a house. Rather than everyone goes to the house whilst the burglars run off in the bushes or woodlands beyond, the drone's up in the air watching where they are and then can deploy all the people. So I don't think it's anything at all like 1984. This is just a more sensible use of police resources to deploy them on where they're needed. And I wish they'd brought them in years earlier. And frankly, it just really annoys the wrong word. It disappoints me that police leaders are so slow in embracing the latest forms of technology, because there aren't enough of them to keep us safe. My goodness me, the police have effectively lost control of the streets in most areas where we live. They don't turn up for most burglaries, and when they do, for all sorts of reasons, not the least of which is a lack of leadership and poor training, they're not robust and they don't wade in when they should.
Yeah, and Kev, they're very useful, aren't they, in rural crime? For example, if they have heat-sensitive cameras, infrared cameras, they're very successful, for example, in tracking down illegal marijuana plantations in rural areas because they can see the heat, and they're also useful on manhunts, aren't they, because people can be seen.
Yeah, I mean, you've got big problems out in rural areas, which is where these are essentially being trialled, because, of course, you can't bring them into central London because you've got Heathrow and Gatwick flying over very close overhead, so that's strictly controlled. But where you've got lots of problems with people stealing farm machinery, rustling cattle and so on, these are perfect to cover large areas of ground where you can then deploy police with appropriate trail bikes or 4x4 vehicles to try and catch the perpetrators before they get them in shipping containers and send them off to Africa or Russia or wherever they go, because once they're gone, they're gone. So, I mean, there are real advantages. And yes, I understand why some people might be concerned about what they think is Big Brother, but you're not going to see drones flying over you routinely patrolling, spying on people. They'll be used for specific incidents, if only because the batteries will run out. And things being what they are, they won't buy enough backup equipment to sustain them. So we're not going to see them everywhere. But, you know, good luck for the people of Norfolk and Suffolk who are going to profit from this.
All right, Kev, we're going to have to leave it there, my old son. Always a pleasure. Great stuff. Let's come back to studio. Suze and Steph are still with us. Suze, what do you reckon about eyes in the sky? Is that the right way to go? I mean, I think Kevin made a very compelling case for it.
I was sceptical, but I was won over.
I can see loads of benefits to it, and you should embrace kind of technology. I'm a bit worried about the batteries running out kind of point he made. At what point does it just fall from the sky and land on somebody's head? And I'm also concerned that if it does become, if there's a proliferation of them, he says there wouldn't be, but if it starts to become, I mean, wasn't there rumours that we were going to start having, like, you know, Amazon deliveries by drones, and there's amateur in theatre? How do you know which is the police one? And how? I mean, you don't want the sky full of them, do you? But with one way or another. But I mean, the one thing I was just looking up the article while he was talking, and it actually said people who do the police forces who have embraced those sort of technologies, facial recognition is actually really, really useful, and that is identifying 200 suspects every month.
Yeah, but
something that would have taken 14 days to do.
We saw the Met Police on Twitter asking the public to help them identify Palestinian marchers who committed violent offences. Would be quite useful for that, wouldn't it?
And I think, Steph, that is where people start to get a bit edgy about this sort of stuff. It's like I'm going about my daily business. I'm not doing anything wrong. Yeah, you're still like, you know, you still got your mince pies on me. Where's that data stored? Is that the right way to go?
I think this is why the public always feel a bit sceptical, and this is where we have to have a bit more trust in the police, that they won't be abusing when they're using such technology, and that it doesn't go to the extreme end where we are being monitored unnecessarily. But we already live in that kind of generation where everyone's got cameras. People have got Ring doorbells and all the rest of them, so to be honest...
And we were talking earlier about those migrants. We were worried about them roaming around. Well, at least if we know there's people have got eyes on them one way or another remotely, or they can do facial recognition, we can track people, those sort of things. Unfortunately, in the world we live in, it is necessary.
I think there is a competence issue a bit as well, though, isn't there? I mean, as he said there, you don't really like the idea of the batteries running out. Who are the people who are going to be running these drones? Are there enough police to actually staff them properly?
A great point he made, and when I was doing elections across West Midlands, rural areas there, North Shropshire, they get scant resource, and if they have the ability to have infrared technology, you know, the cattle are getting nicked or the tractors are getting nicked, you know, these dope farms in rural areas, so it does have real merit.
And it would be a lot cheaper than sending up a helicopter.
And I think those are the
and less polluting.
Yeah.
I think those are the best places to test it out, because central London is just too much of a beast. So I think to test it out rurally and just get it done properly before you bring it to London will be the best thing to do.
Yeah, good stuff. And it's also, you have to have a licence to send a drone up in London.
Yes,
if you do send a drone up in London, then you get in big trouble. Don't do it, ladies and gents.
Absolutely not. No.
Sue's Holder, cracking set of papers. Stick around, we'll see you again in the next hour. Now, as you approach the top of the hour, we have much more to come, but first, let's have a quick look at the weather.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to today, most of us seeing some further outbreaks of rain. There will be a little bit of brightness around, and for all, it will be mild. So as we start Sunday, probably not too bad initially across southeastern England, some brightness here, but elsewhere rather grey with some outbreaks of rain. The rain potentially heavy in places. Going into the afternoon, best of brightness probably across eastern parts of Scotland. Southwestern England actually may also cheer up as the afternoon goes on, but quite blustery, especially down across southwestern England. Could see some coastal gales from time to time, but temperatures on the mild side in the south potentially up to 14 or 15 degrees. Into the night time, it does turn a little bit drier and clearer for a time across parts of England and eastern Wales, but elsewhere, further outbreaks of rain coming and going. It's still quite blustery across many western parts, but it will be another fairly mild night to come. So into Monday, we will see outbreaks of rain spreading their way southeastwards across the UK. Probably turning a little bit drier and brighter for a time across parts of Yorkshire and Lincolnshire. That may well sink its way into parts of the Midlands and East Anglia as the afternoon goes on. But elsewhere, a risk of rain really throughout much of the day, and feeling a little bit chillier down across western parts with that wind. Elsewhere, temperatures around average.
Now, could the Chancellor be about to cut taxes, because reports suggest Jeremy Hunt is mulling a cut in inheritance tax or even income tax or national insurance? And seeing as though we have the highest tax since World War II, maybe that's long overdue. Would you welcome a few more quid in your pocket? We'll be discussing that right when we come back. Please stay with us.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
more energy this time.
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Top of the morning, it's 7 o'clock on Sunday, the 19th of November. Today,
The Chancellor is weighing up a surprise tax cut to woo voters as the election draws closer. But as Labour continues to dominate in the polls with spending and debt out of control, is this just a last-ditch bribe by a dying government? We'll have reaction throughout the programme.
And I'm a Celebrity Get Me Out of Here is set for a dramatic launch tonight with GB News star Nigel Farage in the spotlight. GB News' Ben Leo is live from Australia's Gold Coast.
That's right, I'm going to have all the juicy details of Nigel's first challenge ahead of the first bombshell episode tonight. And there's some explosive pictures of his trial that you won't want to miss.
Great.
And the biggest trial for prostate cancer screening is set to start today as the government is to unveil a £42 million screening programme to find ways in detecting the country's most common cancer in men. We'll be joined by Professor Carol Sikora to tell us more.
And Robbie Williams and his wife have said it's important they don't overly spoil their kids. Despite the couple's lavish lifestyle, we'll be debating, is it important not to spoil your children later in the show?
And Craig will have your latest weather forecast.
Good morning. Many of us saw some rain on Saturday. What does the weather have in store for the second half of the weekend? Find out in a little bit.
I'm Livia Utley.
And I'm Martin Daubney, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Well, could we finally be expecting tax cuts to come? In light of the Chancellor indicating he could reduce business levies to boost economic growth, Jeremy Hunt said difficult decisions to reform the welfare state are required as he considers squeezing benefits by billions while slashing inheritance tax.
And following this, households closest to new pylons and electricity substations could receive up to 10 grand off their bills over the course of a decade under the Chancellor.
This is part of the plan to help halve the time it takes to deliver new electricity networks to 7 years.
Well, join us now in the studio is political commentator Piers Pottinger. Piers, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. At last, the highest tax since World War II. The Tories, on paper, meant to be the party of low tax. They have to give us some form of tax cut, don't they? Or it's history.
Yes. I think Rishi has finally woken up to the fact that he's got to do something radical that's going to affect the pound in your pocket. And for the average family, they need to see some sign that the Conservatives are being conservative, lowering taxes. The question is, how far is he going to go? And at the moment, the party is basically at war with each other. It's a civil war going on. One MP I spoke to last night said he's never had so many calls from different factions, and it's extraordinary what's going on. And the party is in danger of imploding, and tax cuts are absolutely vital. He's got a £25 billion leeway, which he can play with, and some of this is to do with national savings and the increase in people going into national savings because the interest rate's so high. And that gives him some leeway. But I don't see him, personally, I don't think these cuts, I've got a terrible feeling they're not going to be anything like as significant as they should be.
I think this is the absolute danger. I mean, they're talking about a tax to inheritance cut. I think lots of Conservatives would be pretty happy with that. But if there isn't a substantial cut to income tax or national insurance, then we have a big problem. We talk about the average family, and this is the issue. If I know Jeremy Hunt, this will be a bit of a tinkering statement.
That's what I fear, and I think both Hunt and Sunak are very cautious people. And being bold, they haven't been bold so far, I am really concerned that it will be tinkering and have minimal effect. At the moment, they are looking at the face of a massive defeat in the coming election, with a possible Labour majority of over 200, particularly as they're going to wipe out the SNP in Scotland. And if Sunak's going to actually make an impact, inheritance tax goes so far, but he's got to abolish it, not tinker with it, if he's going to have any impact. And also, he's got to do something about corporation tax for businesses. Smaller businesses particularly need encouragement. I'm sure Kemi Badenoch will be lobbying, or has lobbied the Treasury hard on this. But I just get the feeling that it'll be a damp squib. And also, the fact they're trailing it in a very half-hearted way, again, It's ringing alarm bells. It's
Well,
not as
For me
positive as
too.
I think they hope it's going to be.
OK, well, Piers Podger, thanks for joining us. But it is election time, and it's usually all about bribery, isn't it? So we can probably expect some kind of sweetener, but will it be enough? £22.6 trillion in national debt. Can they afford it? Is it fiscally responsible? Or is it just necessary for them to survive? That's the big question. Thanks, Piers. OK, moving on.
Well, season 23 of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here reality TV show begins, broadcast from the Australian jungle.
And the show's set for a dramatic launch tonight as high-profile contestants, including Jamie Lynn Spears, of course that's the sister of pop star Britney, and our very own GB News presenter, Nigel Farage.
Other contestants joining the jungle this series include food critic Grace Dent, reality star Sam Thompson, JLS singer Martin Humes, former EastEnders actress Daniel Harold and Hollyoaks actor Nick Pickard.
Well, join us now live from down under on Australia's Gold Coast is GB News reporter Ben Leo. Ben, it's all over the front page of the papers, and love him or hate him, there's one man dominating them, Captain Nigel Farage.
He's their star signing, Martin. £1.5 million is the rumoured fee. An I'm a Celebrity record signing. And it's fair to say they're going to get their money's worth out of Nigel. The show tonight kicks off the series and Nigel is the star. Earlier this week, they shipped him 2,000 miles out to the Australia's Northern Territory, the outback to you and me, a sweltering 40-degree heat for a challenge that involved sludge, slime and grime. He was knee-deep in gallons of the stuff, and you'll see the full thing tonight. In terms of the other campmates, some of them parachuted in, as they do traditionally have done in recent years, and also the terrifying walk the plank stunt. So it's all going to happen tonight. There's massive fanfare. He's got 3 weeks of this, and if you look at these pictures that dropped overnight of Nigel's challenge in the outback, one in particular left me in stitches when I saw it come out this morning. He looks absolutely revolted and terrified about something, as if he'd walked into a bar full of Remainers or he'd heard that Alistair Campbell had become Prime Minister or something like that. So very excited to see what happens in that trial tonight and, of course, for the next 3 weeks as well.
I love into a bath of Remainers. That's brilliant. I'm fascinated to see what young people make of Nigel Farage. I mean, teenagers during the Brexit referendum will be sort of, coming of age now. What are they going to think of him? He's such a sort of almost a relic from the 2010s era.
Yeah, well, I spoke to Nigel before he came in about that. He reckons, for example, last year there was 10 million viewers at its peak, 18 to 35-year-olds mostly, and that was with Matt Hancock, who was the star signing at the time. Farage, quite arguably, a bigger name and a bigger character than Hancock, so many people expecting a far bigger audience than the 10 million that we had last year. And in terms of Nigel's train of thought, he thinks that if he is going to get back into politics in the future, those 10 million viewers, most of them wouldn't have bothered to give him a chance before or even think about him in terms of an electoral sense. So he thinks there's a massive swathes of the electorate who are untapped and untouched, who he can win over if he does decide to dip his toes back into politics in the future. So it's a great opportunity for him to not only coin a couple of quid, £1.5 million if reports are to be believed, but also build the foundations and really mould the next phase of his political future.
OK, Ben Leo, live from the Gold Coast. My heart's bleeding for you, mate, that it's 40 degrees. Yeah, I feel really sorry for you, mate. Anyway, keep it going, mate. We'll back to you later in the show. Great stuff.
Today is International Men's Day, and the government is joining forces with Prostate Cancer UK to unveil a £42 million screening trial to find ways of detecting the country's most common male cancer earlier.
Hundreds of thousands of men across the country will participate, with 1 in 10 participants set to be black men who have a much higher prostate cancer risk.
Oncologist and former chief of the World Health Organization's cancer programme, Carol Sikora, joins us now. Carol, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I mean, this is fantastic news, isn't it?
It is, Olivia. It really is. I think the problem we've got is that men don't come forward. Women are much better at coming forward with symptoms. They access their GPs better. And as you know, it's quite a challenge to get to see your GP now. And many men with a few urinary symptoms just pack up. They get bored of the whole thing and don't bother. And so often prostate cancer is delayed. What we've seen over the last decade is an improvement in screening technology. not so much the blood test, the PSA test, prostate-specific antigen, but MRIs, magnetic resonance imaging. That can now, using artificial intelligence, pick up cancer from non-cancer. And that's the key. And this trial, which is called Transform, is about seeing how it can be applied to a real huge cohort, millions of men around the country. So it's good news.
Carol, I'm in this age bracket now. I turned 50 a few years ago, and I keep getting text messages to go along for my inspection. I know it's breakfast time. I don't want to put people off, but I don't fancy doing it because I've had mates who've had it done and it's made their eyes water. Could I ask you, is this a non-invasive method of scanning, and therefore it will be much more appealing to many, many more men?
It is. It's non-invasive. That's the key. No needles involved, no pain, no bleeding, nothing, and no disturbance to the process of passing urine. The traditional way of doing it is to do the PSA, if that's high, to get a biopsy, which involves putting a needle into the prostate gland, which is just behind the bladder, just at the bottom of the bladder. So it's an unpleasant place to put needles in, as you can imagine. So many men are reluctant to have the biopsy, but this involves just looking with new techniques at the MRI, the scan itself. So there is no needle, just a scan, and then that's interpreted. Some men will need to have a needle to prove that they actually have cancer, but at least the test screens out at least 2/3 of men will be saved any biopsy, any needle. So it'll be much more acceptable. And, you know, there are huge ethnic differences in take-up of these things. And the very population we need to reach, Afro-Caribbean males, is the most reluctant to come forward and unfortunately has the highest incidence for reasons that we just don't understand.
Yeah, and Carol, that's it's International Men's Day today, of course. I used to be a UK ambassador for that. It's the same with mental health. Those stubborn demographics are the hardest to reach. So, look, this is going out as a nationwide pilot. When will it roll out to the population as a whole? And to be honest, I'd like to take part in it. Can I get involved?
It depends. It depends on your postcode. It depends on your GP and so on. The idea is to do a pilot. It costs 43 million. You know, the breast program was politically driven by Maggie Thatcher in 1989. It was a bizarre choice to roll that out around the country. It has done good, not so much because of the mammography, the X-ray, but because a setup was created to process women that had lumps in the breast. So anyone can use it, even if they have a lump, even if they haven't gone through the screening program. Let's hope the same thing happens with this. It'll set up men's clinics where you can go and in one day you can have a biopsy if necessary, scans, and then have a plan for treatment. At the moment, 59% of people get treated within 2 months of diagnosis of cancer. That's really not good enough. And that's the key problem we've got in the oncology community, getting people, men and women, through whatever their cancer quickly enough. This will help to speed up prostate cancer, I'm sure, and that's got to be a good thing.
Well, Professor Carol Sikora, thank you for this. Your pioneering work, much appreciated, as it was during lockdown, a voice of common sense in troublesome times. Thank you very much for joining us with this great news on International Men's Day. Cheers.
Well, the time is 7:13, and let's have a look now at some of the other stories coming into the GB newsroom this morning.
And MPs have criticised the shocking lack of detail provided by ministers on the crumbling concrete crisis in schools, as they warned about the alarming state of classroom buildings. In a report by the Public Accounts Committee, MPs said unacceptable numbers of pupils are learning in poorly maintained or potentially unsafe buildings in England.
Energy regulator Ofcom will announce its latest price cap on Thursday, with energy consultants predicting a 5% jump to take effect from January to March. The forecast suggests that the typical bill will then fall to £1,853 from the start of April, but will not drop below today's level until July next year.
And 37 minibuses and electric vehicles have been provided to Albania by the British government at a cost of £1.5 million as part of a recent deal to return Albanian prisoners. The arrangement will see 200 Albanian nationals jailed in England and Wales sent home for the rest of their sentence. In return, the government said it would help modernise the Albanian prison system. Just want to talk about Carol Sikora and just how amazing that bloke was during lockdown. He was one of the very, very few who spoke out about the cancer time bomb that was being caused by lockdowns, people unable to see their GPs, and what he's doing with prostate cancer today on International Men's Day, inspiring. That bloke, I think, is an absolute legend.
Absolutely. I mean, every single one of his predictions through lockdown came true. We did have this huge delay in people getting seen for cancer, and we've now seen a spike, very sadly, in cancer deaths. And he has been on the forefront of this from the very beginning. And it's really great to see him talking about something positive this morning.
Yeah.
What a man, really.
Yeah, a common sense oncologist, a common sense practitioner who just sees things in terms of patient care, in terms of data. And look, he's out there just doing, I think, God's work. Thank you, Professor Carol Sikora. OK, let's move on. There's lots more still to come. This hour, it's jam-packed, but first, let's have a quick look at today's weather. What's in store?
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to today, most of us seeing some further outbreaks of rain. There will be a little bit of brightness around, and for all, it will be mild. So as we start Sunday, probably not too bad initially across southeastern England. Some brightness here, but elsewhere rather grey with some outbreaks of rain. The rain potentially heavy in places. Going into the afternoon, best of brightness probably across eastern parts of Scotland. Southwestern England actually may also cheer up as the afternoon goes on, but quite blustery, especially down across southwestern England. Could see some coastal gales from time to time, but temperatures on the mild side in the south potentially up to 14 or 15 degrees. Into the night time, it does turn a little bit drier and clearer for a time across parts of England and eastern Wales, but elsewhere, further outbreaks of rain coming and going. It's still quite blustery across many western parts, but it will be another fairly mild night to come. So into Monday, we will see outbreaks of rain spreading their way southeastwards across the UK. Probably turning a little bit drier and brighter for a time across parts of Yorkshire and Lincolnshire. That may well sink its way into parts of the Midlands and East Anglia as the afternoon goes on. But elsewhere, a risk of rain really throughout much of the day, and feeling a little bit chillier down across western parts with that wind. Elsewhere, temperatures around average.
Well, Robbie Williams and his wife have said it's important they don't overly spoil their children, despite the couple's lavish lifestyle. We'll be debating, is it important not to spoil your children? That's next on Britain's News Channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back. It's 7:21 and you're watching and listening to Breakfast with Olivia and Martin.
Now, Ada Field-Williams has revealed how she makes sure and her husband, Robbie Williams' 4 kids, do not become overly spoilt despite the couple's lavish lifestyle.
The X Factor judge, 44, told The Times in a new interview that neither she nor Robbie are interested in raising brats.
And while Ada's methods might not be totally relatable, the desire to raise considerate, well-mannered children is. However, it can be difficult to set boundaries and to say no to children. Every parent wants their child to get what they need and wants so they can be happy.
Joining us now to discuss this is personal finance blogger and mum Emma Bradley and mother and parenting consultant Roma Norris.
Now, the thing about this story, right, is that Robbie and his missus made the kids sit in cattle class on a flight, right, while they were lording it up in first class. Now, that's not something that we can all relate to. Let's start with that. But, Emma, do you think he's got a point? Is it the right thing to do to make sure they don't get a taste for the high life? Put them back in cattle class, make them suffer a bit.
No, I mean, for me, I like to treat my kids. I work hard so that they can have the best. Now, I get what they're saying, but these people, you know, OK, they're going to travel cattle class, as you're calling it. They're then going to get off that into their private cars with their private chefs, go to their private schools. I mean, one flight isn't going to teach them not to be spoiled, is it?
Roma, I sort of sympathise with that view. I mean, if you are very rich, your children, like you're not, are going to have a very nice life. Is there any point in even bothering to try not spoiling them?
I actually think it's a misconception that spoiling is something material. I think it's not something that's related to differences in wealth, but more to do with our values. So regardless of background, we can prevent spoiling by setting healthy limits, modelling on a day-to-day basis things like gratitude and conscientiousness. It's much more about how we conduct ourselves than the kind of material things that we give our children.
And Emma, I think that's a great point, isn't it? I mean, if children understand the value of a pound note, if they understand the value of treats, of anything they get, then that's the way to go, surely. I mean, I make my kids work for their money a lot of the time. And as for flying, I said to my daughter when we went to Rhodes recently, she said, "Oh, can we take the cat?" I said, "We can take the cat if you go in the hold with the cat." And she said, "OK." So I didn't put her in the hold. I'll get back to my point. I'm getting a bit off piste here. But isn't it about teaching kids the value of money so therefore they appreciate it rather than just expecting it and being entitled?
Yeah, absolutely. And as we've just said, there are so many ways you can teach children these important values. You can teach children the value of money through pocket money, through just having honest conversations. Children need to know how much things cost. So, you know, rather than just saying you're not coming on this flight with me and you can sit in the back because I want to sip my champagne at the front, you know, it's having conversations about how much things cost, how to work, the value of hard work. You know, I have spoilt my kids relative to other people as well. And I think that's the thing. It's all relative.
Oh, we lost her. Roma, let's pick it with you.
Lost them both.
Lost both of them.
Roma,
Yeah, so I think it's Go on.
Roma, I think that's a really interesting point you made there, that spoiling isn't necessarily about material items.
Yeah.
It's about the values that you bring to your children. You're a parenting consultant. Is there any advice you'd give to parents watching who perhaps are worried that they are spoiling their children and want them to be brought up as, polite, nice kids? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, it's understandable. We all want our children to grow up, being good citizens, having something to contribute. We worry about brattiness. That's not actually a word I love, but this is something that can be prevented by regularly setting healthy and appropriate boundaries. It's when we give children too much power that they start to act out, and it's actually a signal to us. It's a kind of cry for help, that they need more containment so they can feel more held. They need to know that we're the ones leading the family and that we've got this.
And Emma, maybe it was your children pulled your internet cable out there because they heard you having a go about entitled children. But on a serious point, don't you just tend to find that these things flow downhill? Like in my observation, I'm going out for Sunday lunch today, and I see entitled parents, and you can tell a mile off. They're the ones whose kids throw all the food on the floor, and the parents don't tidy up. They learn to be entitled by, I think, poor parenting.
Yeah, we absolutely do need to model what we want our children to be like. So it is important that we're teaching them the value of money, that we're teaching them respect. And that happens in everyday education and everyday life. It's the conversations we have. We really need, especially in this cost of living crisis, for children and young people to grow up knowing things cost, and that maybe families have choices to make, for example, as well. So the conversation needs to be ongoing, honest and open, not just one flight, and that's going to show them how the other half live.
Roma, I think there's definitely a new brand of sort of modern parenting which encourages treating your children as though they are adults, as though they are capable of making the same sort of decisions as adults. Do you think that actually sort of can sometimes spill over into just spoiling your children, and that actually perhaps the best way to parent is for the parents for the children to know who's the parent and who's the child?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think
children.
We'll go with Roma first.
Sorry. I think it's a natural reaction to the kind of autocratic parenting that most of us receive, to the very sort of disciplinarian parenting, which is also, too far in the other direction. It's understandable that parents are overcompensating in the other direction. But ideally, we want to be able to set limits, also with kindness. And the risk of not doing so is that we can create something that I call alpha child syndrome, which is where children either become kind of very defiant, they throw tantrums every time they don't get what they need. They're kind of the ones calling the shot. You all know those kind of children.
Yeah. We're all nodding along.
Or they can just go the other way. They can become sort of quietly over responsible and just taking care of things in the background and doing more than what a child actually should be doing. So yes, absolutely. Our kids need our leadership.
Emma, alpha child syndrome, I've got a different word for that, and it's brat. And isn't that the problem? A lot of kids these days become brats because they simply aren't set firm boundaries. This touchy-feely parenting that you're talking about, I think, creates monsters. Isn't the clear way forward a bit of a mix? Some old-fashioned parenting, set boundaries. I'm the boss. I want to be your friend, but I'm not just your friend. I'm also your mum, I'm your dad or your parent. I'm in control. I'm in charge. Make sure you understand who's the boss.
Yeah, I agree as well. My eldest is 23 and, we are very close and we spend a lot of time together, but I'm not her best friend. I'm still her mum, even at her age now. Her best friend is somebody totally different and I don't want to be her best friend. I've got my own friends. But, again, I do believe that, kids thrive when they've got structures and boundaries in place. They do in school and they do at home. And that doesn't mean, shouting and being the loudest in the room, but it is that calm parenting that you make the decisions and you have those values that you instill.
OK, Emma Bradley and Rowan Norris, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us. Not a single tantrum between them. Well done. Great stuff. A huge debate. Let us know what you think about that, because, I see these kids that just kind of charge around pubs on a Sunday lunch. They're tearing the place apart. They're screaming. They're leaving mayhem behind. They're leaving rubbish on the floor, and the kids just aren't looking. They're just looking the other way. They're on their phones. They're chatting away, and it's like, sort that kid out.
And then you see the parents, their sort of 3-year-old child, they're sort of trying to reason with them and explaining how they could be behaving differently, and you just think, just tell them off. Children don't understand that complicated, logical reason.
Get in touch about that. Do you think that the old-fashioned way is best? Did our parents know best? Have we become too touchy-feely, too soft? We want to be your mates. You don't want to be their mates. You want to be their parent. Let us know what you think. Let's get back to basics. I think that's the best way. You can probably tell. gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, up next, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have said they want a royal Christmas. Well, good luck with that. We'll have all the details next in Headline Makers. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
Your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back. It's 7:34 and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Well, joining us to go through some of the day's headlines now is author and journalist Susan Holder and showbiz reporter and broadcaster Stephanie Tetchy. But first, let's have a look at what's made the front pages this morning.
The Daily Mail leads with their special investigation into the gang rapists deported back to Somalia.
And the Express leads with the manhunt underway for 6 terror suspects believed to be in the UK.
The Mirror has on its front page the report claiming that £100 billion of taxpayers' money has been wasted by the Tories.
And the Sun's front page features sick tweets made by I'm a Celebrity's Grace Dent against Nigel Farage.
And the Daily Star leads Boffins claims you could bust that beer belly by munching berries.
Now, I hope we're doing that one, because that's something that I have a great interest in. Anyway, let's go now to Suze and Steph. Why don't we kick off, Steph, with this one? An alarming headline. 1 in 3 women have experienced sexual assault on trains.
Yes, it is very alarming, and they say that in this thing in The Sun, the article, it says that most of the attacks occur between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m, which is rush hour. So let's break down what they mean by being sexually assaulted as a woman on a train. It says it could be touching, it could be a man pressing too close to you, when it gets really packed on the carriages. They've said it's upskirting. They say it's indecent exposure as well. They say 51% of victims have had other passengers intervene to their help. But when it actually comes to reporting it to the police, it actually drops down to 18%. Me, myself, I haven't been a victim of being sexually assaulted on a train. I do understand when you're a bit too on a train and everyone's packed like sardines and then you've got some horrible sweaty person behind you.
We've all had
and
that.
it just happens to be a man.
But I've had that. I've had that, and I'm a bloke.
This is what I think. It feels a bit like a bit of a loose interpretation of sexual assault. If you're on the tube in rush hour, people will be pressing up against you.
And I wonder,
it's strange to interpret that as assault.
I wonder how helpful these sort of headlines are, because straight away it gets blokes as a token bloke on the panel. I know this is a serious issue, but it gets bloke shackles up because it's like, hang on, no, I'll be, and I have been, one of the 51% who would get involved and give somebody a thump if necessary, if they're groping a woman. Like, you're not going to stand for that, right?
Yeah.
That's what blokes should be doing. But if it's like being pressed against or being looked at, it's like, are we lessening the actual severity of a genuine assault by broadening it out too far and making men feel like they're a bit of a problem? Or is this not about men?
Well, I think it is about that. I mean, I personally haven't had that happen to me either. I am very aware when I go on public transport, though. I don't sit there with my head in a book or my AirPods in or anything like that. My son's girlfriend, they live in... I mean, I come in and out of London regularly, but they live in London. They commute all the time, and she's in her 20s, she's blonde. She's had it happen a couple of times to her. And one of the times she was sat on a tube train, there was a few people, she wasn't on her own, there were a few people around, and the man came and sat right next to her and licked her face.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my God.
Exactly. Oh, my God. And she got her head down and AirPods on, so it shocked her, obviously, and she recoiled, and he then started kind of being aggressive with her because she was kind of backing off from him. Another man came from the other side of the couch, sat next to her, said, just talk to me, and waited till the next stop where they got off and reported.
That sort of fella, that's what we need.
Yeah.
We need other men standing in.
So these things do happen. I actually find the tube quite a courteous place. I know this is...
I know what you mean.
Opposite. People go, after you, as you're jumping through the doors. And I'm like, what do you mean after you? We haven't got time for that behaviour. Just get in. But buses are where I find you get a lot more aggro. And I don't mean sexual necessarily, but just women and men being very kind of pushy and aggressive with you and jostling. I've actually been pushed around on buses quite a few times in London, but not on... But I think it's not kind of fair to say just because we don't happen to have those experiences, we have to recognise that it is a thing. And I think just travelling alone late at night, this is where, I mean, I do think this is where staff should be more present on tubes, on trains.
Absolutely.
I think because we don't have people going up and down because there aren't people around, then if people are behaving terribly, there's not much you can do about it.
The thing is, there are adverts on trains now. I think the reason why these cases have gone up, because I've seen on the train, they'll be like, if you feel uncomfortable, if you think you've been looked at inappropriately, absolutely please report it. And I think more women are feeling braver to come and report these cases on the train. And I think every organisation now wants to kind of make it seem that they are doing something when it comes to taking sexual assault seriously. So the trains aren't, you know, amiss from that.
One thing I think they could do to take sexual assault more seriously is to properly get the night tube up and running again in London. I think there's a huge problem with women who, you know, go out late at night. They might even be working late at night, want to get home and don't have a safe way of getting home.
And you can't get Ubers anymore in the city centre. It's very difficult.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a problem. It must be a problem everywhere. If you go out as a woman and you're trying to get home, you want to feel that those facilities are there and they're properly staffed and they're run properly.
Especially when driving in London is just so...
But also, you do have a responsibility to be aware of yourself. I mean, if I felt... I would hopefully wouldn't kind of let it get to anything. If I thought somebody was looking at me in a funny way or somebody had followed me particularly on a tube, I would get off and get the next one. I would move myself.
It's important. It's not, you know, this is a bit bigger than London, you know. I mean, it's a night bus, you know, if you live in most ordinary parts of Britain. And all I'm saying is, you know, these sort of conversations need to include men as part of the solution, rather than sort of treating men as part of the problem. Because that sort of bloke who sits down and says, talk to me, that's the sort of bloke you want to be.
And then gets angry with you when you say, no, I really don't want it. And that is, I mean, that's that kind of toxic masculinity thing.
It's not about...
but hang on a sec. I want to pick up on that.
Go on.
Because the phrase toxic masculinity, it's International Men's Day, is something that really sticks in my craw. And
because you don't think it exists?
It doesn't exist. It's made up. And I'll tell you why. Yesterday, we did a huge report on knife crime, Operation Sceptre, handing in blades, and we had a young lad in, was it Andre? Andre, who was a youth crime representative from Coventry, you know, around your neck of the woods, and he was saying that what we need is more positive masculinity in these young lads' lives, male role models who were missing, absent fathers for whatever reasons, and actually they are then preyed upon, groomed essentially by criminals, by gangsters who see vulnerable young men and they become that alpha male. A toxic man takes over from the lack of positive masculinity. So on International Men's Day, let's hear it for positive masculinity.
That's true,
but in order minds...
We're both trying to get... We'll form a queue.
What have I started?
But Martin, in order to get to positivity, we have to deal with the negativity when it comes to toxic masculinity. And it is women who are on the receiving end of it, and it has been growing. I do feel like...
Well, most assaults are men on men, so it's men doing it, but most people who get bashed about are men. But look, it's not a competition for victimhood.
No, it's not, and I just think it comes about dealing with the culture that young men have been grown with and what they have around them. I do agree they do need more positive role models, but I think as a society we do need to see where is it going wrong for our young men? What are they missing?
Actually, Steph, I wanted to ask you about this. I've noticed recently, almost every TV programme and film I watch, all of the men seem to be, the characters seem to be sort of pathetic or embarrassing or downright horrible. And I think there is a problem. It sounds a bit trite, but no male role models on television.
No. And I think, to be honest, because there's been almost too...
Thank you for saying that.
Female empowerment in that sense. I feel like the man's role in society is being diminished and women have grown their voice and that's kind of trickled into the entertainment world a bit. And every kind of person who does TV, whatever, they don't want it to make it seem where a man could be making a woman, you know, undermining her in that sense.
As a woman, I'm a bit sick of watching sort of brilliant, feisty, amazing women who seem pretty unrealistic, to be honest. I mean,
but you have to...
I've converted you all.
How old are you?
I'm 30.
You're 30. Yeah, you have to bear with people who have been around a bit longer, who have seen...
Absolutely.
But it's great that you're bored of it now. That's brilliant, because it's obviously quite present for you, and you see that a lot. But if you haven't seen that for a long time...
I do understand
and in the past, it might not have been. But I think you're right. I think the pendulum shouldn't swing. And what nobody should do, women shouldn't do it to men, men shouldn't do it to women. To make yourself strong and resilient, you shouldn't be pulling somebody else down. You should be, and that's the problem. But to say toxic masculinity is made up, I will pick you up on that.
It is made up.
Because, well, I don't agree with that, because I think we might not have all been sexually assaulted on the tube, but I think as women, we are all faced every day with men who will try and tell us something to our face, that will mansplain to us all the time.
There's a different phrase for that, and I can't say it on
maybe you just don't like the phrase, but an arrogance of a male-dominated situation is a real thing that that women do have to find combat.
All right, let's move on.
We've strayed from the start.
Let's move on, and I think we could all agree we've got some gender parity. We've got some understanding going on here. This is great. You see, we can all talk about the fact that Susan's wrong.
Now you see, that's dangerous now. Right.
I'm going to move on before I end up wearing this coffee. Sue, let's get to your story about a couple always seemingly at it, Harry and Meghan.
Yes. Apparently, and if we know anything about the Sussexes, we know that anything that's in the papers, I think we've all learned now, there are leaks, they're as leaky as a cauldron, aren't they? Anything that is in the papers is because they've kind of put it out there and they want it to be known. They're kind of making it known that if an invitation to Christmas at Sandringham was offered, or summer at Balmoral, they'll take summer at Balmoral, wouldn't we all? Wouldn't we all? Then they may accept that. Now, that might be lovely for them, but I think as Christmas is approaching, and a lot of people watching this at home will probably be thinking of families and people that they need to see that possibly that they kind of, could do without. So it's a family kind of situation that everybody can identify with, that you've got to have somebody kind of sharing your turkey that maybe you think you're going to have an argument with rather than pull a cracker. But yeah, I find this fascinating. I mean, the Sussexes, to me, I was one of those people who watched the wedding, just thinking what a brilliant thing this was. I was so pleased for Harry. I thought she was absolutely phenomenal. I still think she could be. I don't see any evidence of her trying to do that. But this is two people who had everything on a plate. When you saw the thousands and thousands of people who wished them well on their wedding, to have come to where they are, how you can throw away the opportunity to do good, to be amazing, to have everything that they wanted, as well. They've thrown it away so far.
Totally agree, but Steph, don't you think, though, this is just typical of them? It's like, I know we've been complete nightmares all year, but we'd love a bit of turkey at the palace, please.
Well, to be honest, I think this was always going to happen. Like, reality was going to always hit them at some point, and more than anything, beyond the headlines, this is a family here, Prince Harry reached out to King Charles earlier this week, and they had a phone call, and apparently, the lines of communication is open for them. And as in with any family, you do have to try repair what's gone on. They can't be at odds with the royal families for the rest of their life. And if the royal family is willing to give them that branch of an invitation to Christmas, and they're saying they're open to it, clearly Harry and Meghan want to make amends. And why shouldn't they have that opportunity?
Do you think they should invite
Yes, I think they should invite them, because they're a part of the family.
I agree with you.
They are the rebels of the family.
I think the problem is anything that happens around the table, or any sort of situation with the royal family, that they know now, the royal family will know it'll be part of the next book, it'll be part of the next Netflix series. Well, they're trading constantly, and I don't know how they're going to stop that.
This is where King Charles needs to be a father to his son and tell him, this is not on. If you want to be a part of this family with your wife, you're going to have to fix up on certain things. It's not about playing for the media. It's actually him putting his foot down as a father and saying, Harry, look...
OK, on the one hand, Christmas is a time for forgiveness.
Yes, it is.
It's a time of coming together. But on the other hand, it's like, well, you didn't come to my 75th birthday.
He wasn't invited.
You just phoned me up.
They weren't invited.
And Meghan didn't come to the coronation because she
didn't want to steal the limelight.
She didn't want to steal the limelight. The coronation. Come off it. What a load of codswallop.
I don't mean... Sorry.
Sorry. Everyone would have been concentrated on Meghan at the coronation. By her not coming, it was still a big thing. It still made headlines. So can you imagine if she came? She has a cheek to turn up. That's what would have happened.
If she'd been giving you, your family in the neck all year like this, would you say, come round and have some turkey and some plum duff, love? I wouldn't.
Well, it's all about forgiveness at Christmas.
I think the grandkids I feel sorry for. There's another piece in one of the papers today about how close King Charles is to his three grandchildren from William and Kate. And you could see that. We know that. We don't have to read it in the paper. We don't have to wait for a leak. We don't have to wait for Omid Scobie or whatever his name is to tell us all about that. Because when you watch the footage of the Jubilee thing, and you saw him bouncing Louis on his knee and the children running over to him, it's clear they have a relationship. And you see that, and your heart does break a bit, actually, for the two grandchildren of Harry and Meghan.
They don't have very much family at all, because obviously Meghan's not
because they've fallen out with everybody.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't think Doria. I think Doria's now, days are numbered, aren't they? I mean, she's the only person that Meghan haven't fallen out with. Everybody else is just persona non grata.
I don't mean to sound too sceptical, but I think if I were King Charles, I'd be a little bit worried, because Meghan and Harry's whole identity is built off spilling stories about the royal family, and obviously they've kind of run out of stories about the royal family now. They haven't seen them for years,
they want to come back.
which is possibly why they want to come back.
Right,
totally.
OK, let's move on to another story about Meghan. We've got another story about Meghan. Meghan's appearance at A-list party viewed as a slick power play. What's going on here?
Well, earlier this week, she attended the Power of Women Gala in Hollywood and LA, and she made a solo appearance. And I like this piece by Carol Graham in the Mail today, because I know Hollywood's quite fickle, and now questions are being asked. What is next for Harry and Meghan? She did allude that they've got some exciting things coming up next year.
That's Meghan's word, though, isn't it? It's exciting. I'll be the judge of that, love.
But, you know, in Caroline's piece, she talks about, you know, how are they going to make the cash? Because their deal with Netflix runs out in 2025. They've had a string of flops to their name. So it's like, what is next for Harry and Meghan? And I think when it comes to Hollywood, you're only as good as your last big hit. And because they've had so many flops now, I do think, what is next for Meghan and how are they going to be able to
And they've had so
bring
many
something
flops
interesting?
because they haven't put the work in. They had a podcast studio built in their Montecito mansion and they did barely a few hours' work. When she was doing a podcast, she wouldn't interview everybody herself. She only wanted to interview the famous people. She got other people, the researchers could do all the rest of it. If you want to make it big in Hollywood, or indeed anywhere, it's about work. And I don't, they're like the kind of... They remind me of the teenagers that you see sometimes. Possibly people will have around their table at Christmas and see them, and they don't really want a proper job. They just want to do what... I'm going to be a TikTok influencer. No, you're not, love. But that's what they're like. And it's just like, that's not a job. Go and do some real work and then come back to me and tell me what you want to do.
That's why I do feel sorry for them, because I feel like they've got an identity crisis at the moment where they're no longer a part of the royals. They're in big Hollywood, which will drop you faster than anything. So right now they're both thinking, how do we make ourselves relevant? So they do need to align themselves with the royals.
Do some work. But they've got the biggest platform they had. I mean, it's diminishing, it seems, because people are less interested. Apparently their hits on them on social media and things are getting less and less, and I can understand that, because we've heard it all before. I mean, the man from Spotify who called them grifters absolutely got his finger on it, if you ask me. But they still have. She's gorgeous. She's very erudite. She can speak really well. You know, he's very lovable when he wants to be. They could do so much amazing work around the planet if they wanted to. I have no idea what they think they're up to.
Well, they bang on about climate change and take a private jet, and they bang on about, you know, racism when the very proof that Meghan was warmly welcomed and loved in the royal family surely is proof
Prince
there was no
Charles
racism.
walking her down the aisle. Absolutely.
I think that's a problem. Shall we do something else that's not just about the royals?
Yes.
Suze,
yes.
Cool story about pensions. Pop icon Sandy Shaw, many of you, of course, will remember, is talking about pensions triple locks. Tell us about this.
So Sandy Shaw, who you may remember as the barefoot Eurovision winner who sang Puppet on a String, she's 76 now, and she's got involved in what sounds like a really great kind of initiative, actually. It's a manifesto for later life by campaigners' later life ambitions. And some of the things that they're calling for, they're saying basically that if you ignore pensions, obviously, at your peril, that both the government and the opposition are kind of, you know, a dereliction of duty, really. And it's something I feel quite passionate about. I mean, I'm not there yet. I'm in my 50s. But I can never understand why we don't put more effort into looking after where we're all heading, hopefully, into our old age. And we just kind of dismiss it. And yet everyone's going to get there. And what are you going to do when you get there if you haven't put the thought in?
Yeah, there's a huge amount of disquiet about the fact, you know, you've paid your stamp for your whole life, and suddenly they're nudging the the age. I don't think I'll ever get a pension. I'll be 90 before I get one.
They told me that years ago, and I opted out because I was told that. And now, as I kind of, as I get to late 50s, it seems it is still there.
And it is important, especially as we have an ageing population, and it's only people are living longer. And I feel like this is the kind of stuff that should be spoken about to young people from when they're young, to start thinking, one day you will be old, you won't always be this fit, and how are you going to look after yourself financially beyond the government?
And some of the things in the Later Life Manifesto, protecting the pensions triple lock is one. Tackling the housing crisis by building more retirement properties, making it easier for pensioners to move out of family homes, which could then be put on the market for younger people. Increase investment, which we touched on before, in local bus and rail service to ensure they're suitable for the elderly. End bank branch closures that help older people. They haven't got it here, but keep cash. Don't put everything on an app. Make it a choice.
Okay.
But not everybody wants to be able to use that. I think making things accessible for
OK, Suze, we have to leave it there. We have to leave it there. Superb stuff, Steph.
But I was right on that, wasn't I? I was right on that.
You were right on that one, but not anything else. Anyway, it's approached top of the hour. We have much more to come. But first, let's take a look at the weather.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to today, most of us seeing some further outbreaks of rain. There will be a little bit of brightness around, and for all, it will be mild. So as we start Sunday, probably not too bad initially across southeastern England, some brightness here, but elsewhere rather grey with some outbreaks of rain. The rain potentially heavy in places. Going into the afternoon, best of brightness probably across eastern parts of Scotland. Southwestern England actually may also cheer up as the afternoon goes on, but quite blustery, especially down across southwestern England. Could see some coastal gales from time to time, but temperatures on the mild side in the south potentially up to 14 or 15 degrees. Into the night time, it does turn a little bit drier and clearer for a time across parts of England and eastern Wales, but elsewhere, further outbreaks of rain coming and going. It's still quite blustery across many western parts, but it will be another fairly mild night to come. So into Monday, we will see outbreaks of rain spreading their way southeastwards across the UK. Probably turning a little bit drier and brighter for a time across parts of Yorkshire and Lincolnshire. That may well sink its way into parts of the Midlands and East Anglia as the afternoon goes on. But elsewhere, a risk of rain really throughout much of the day, and feeling a little bit chillier down across western parts with that wind. Elsewhere, temperatures around average.
OK, could the Chancellor be about to cut taxes? Well, reports suggest Jeremy Hunt is mulling a cut in inheritance tax. We'll discuss this when we return. Stay with us.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 8 o'clock on Sunday, the 19th of November. Today,
the Chancellor is weighing up a surprise tax cut to woo voters as the election draws closer. But as Labour continues to dominate in the polls with spending and debt out of control, is this just a last-ditch bribe by a dying government? We'll have reaction throughout the programme.
And I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here is set for a dramatic launch tonight with GB News star Nigel Farage in the spotlight. GB News' Ben Leo is live from Australia's Gold Coast.
That's right, we're just hours away from the sensational launch of I'm a Celebrity, including Nigel Farage's debut trial. I've got some exclusive pictures of his activities overnight, and also I'll tell you who he might have some early confrontations with in the camp.
As protests continue to take place across the UK, communities are being divided. We'll be asking spokespeople from the Christian, Muslim and Jewish communities to see if religion can unify the country.
And Craig will have your latest weather forecast.
Good morning. Many of us saw some rain on Saturday. What does the weather have in store for the second half of the weekend? Find out in a little bit.
And Aidan McGee will be here with all the latest news from the world of sport.
Yes, good morning. In the Premier League, it never rains, but it pours for poor old Everton. They could face further punishment in addition to the 10-point deduction they received on Friday. And in F1, Max Verstappen in the last few minutes has just won that controversial Vegas Grand Prix.
I'm Olivia Utley.
And I'm Martin Daubney, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Well, could we finally be expecting tax cuts to come? In light of the Chancellor indicating he could reduce business levies to boost economic growth, Jeremy Hunt said difficult decisions to reform of the welfare state are required as he considers squeezing benefits by billions while slashing inheritance tax.
And following this, households closest to the new pylons and electricity substations could receive up to 10 grand off their bills over the course of a decade, according to new plans from the Chancellor.
This is part of a plan to help halve the time it takes to deliver new electricity networks to just 7 years.
Well, joining us now is local government editor at Conservative Home, Harry Phibbs. Harry, what took them so long? We've got the highest tax since World War II. The Tories are meant to be the party of low tax. Could we at last get some crumbs of comfort from the Chancellor?
It's looking good, isn't it? I think they've understood that it's not enough for them to keep putting up taxes and putting up spending and saying, oh, don't worry, everyone, we're still Conservatives. We still believe in low state spending and low tax. After a few years, that wears a bit thin, and it's no good them having the same message in the next Conservative manifesto and leaving it till then. So I think it is looking promising. The mistake Liz Truss made, of course, was to try and have tax cuts without spending. I think it's also encouraging that they're talking about looking at further welfare reforms. Ian Duncan Smith did some made some good progress on that, but it's not doing anybody any favours to leave them trapped in welfare dependency. It's not good for mental health. If people are able to work, then they should work, and that's certainly something that can save billions of pounds for the taxpayer. But it's also the morally the right thing to do for the people involved.
Really interesting point here about not just the economic potential that these people who are on benefits could bring to the country, but also the sort of human potential. In some cities in the UK, 1 in 5 working-age people are out of work. You know, there'll be... Labour will probably say that squeezing benefits is immoral, but surely it's immoral to keep people out of work who could be living a so much more fulfilling life if they had jobs.
I agree. And it's also about giving people an incentive. And so to some extent it ties in with having tax cuts, that people need to be better off working than on benefits. And we talk about the Laffer curve for the rich, that if you have lower taxes, Nigel Lawson found you ended up with higher tax revenues because you're rewarding enterprise and rewarding success. And I think it applies to low earners as well. If people are better off working than they are on benefits, of course that's inevitably going to have an impact on their motivation to go out and work. By the way, I was also pleased to see talk about inheritance tax, because that's something that the Conservatives have been promising back since the days of George Osborne. And I think particularly if they were to go the whole hog and abolish inheritance tax, I think that really would help to motivate a lot of Conservative voters. And it's people who don't necessarily, are not necessarily in the bracket of paying the inheritance tax themselves, but they feel it's a particularly pernicious thing and particularly unfair thing when people have already paid tax on their earnings, to then when they die, and at that time of grief for their relatives to have to go through it. And of course, it's not necessarily the people who will be receiving the inheritance wouldn't necessarily be millionaires. Often the sons, daughters, nephews, nieces, godchildren, whatever, they might be on relatively low incomes, and they're the ones who in reality, of course, are being hit by the inheritance tax, not the person who's died.
Harry, we're approaching general election, and elections are times for bribes, let's be honest. But we're £2.6 trillion in debt. Jeremy Hunt has found 20 billion to play with. We can't really afford it as a nation, but the Tories cannot afford to not give voters a tax cut, can they? Because if they don't, they are simply dead and buried.
Oh, it's an absolutely core reason, traditionally, for people to vote Conservative, that they want to have individual freedom, individual responsibility, and that involves being able to spend more of their own money rather than having the state treating them like children and spending our money for them. And that's absolutely basic to Conservative principles. And it's astonishing that the Conservatives have failed so badly recently that people in the opinion polls associate Labour more than the Conservatives with low tax. So absolutely critical to recover that. I don't think of it in terms of bribing people. I mean, it's our money. If they're taking less of our money, I think some of the language used about giveaways and so on is a bit perverse. But what I would say is that it needs to be done. They need to get on with it, and it needs to be done on a substantial scale. I think we mentioned welfare as one area where they could make savings. Another one that should get far more attention are the quangos, where there's a lot of meddling and bureaucracy from quangos, but they also spend vast sums of money, tens of billions of pounds, and so that would be another candidate. But the idea that it's impossible to cut spending is nonsense. There's a great potential to make substantial spending cuts, and that's the route to having big tax cuts, which would, I think, mean that the Conservatives, even at this late stage, could have a revival in their fortunes.
OK, Harry Phibbs, local government editor at Conservative Home. Thanks for joining us on GB News Breakfast.
Well, Series 23 of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here reality TV show begins, broadcast from the Australian jungle.
And the show is set for a dramatic launch tonight as high-profile contestants include Jamie Lynn Spears, of course, that's the sister of pop star Britney, and, of course, our very own GB News presenter, Captain Nigel Farage.
And other contestants joining the jungle this series include food critic Grace Dent, reality star Sam Thompson, JLS singer Marvin Humes, former EastEnders actress Daniel Harold, and Hollyoaks actor Nick Pickard.
Now, if you had to Google them, you're not alone. But anyway, joining us now, live from Australia's Gold Coast, is GB... Oh, look at that. He's got his cork hat on. It's Ben Leo, live from the Gold Coast. Ben, the front pages of today's newspapers are talking about only one man. Of course, that's our Nigel Farage.
Oh, you just cut out there, Martin, but I think you were talking about the front pages. Yeah, today's front page of the Sun newspaper, an explosive story about the Guardian columnist, a lefty, Nigel, of course, right of centre, the man who led the Brexit campaign. The Sun uncovered swathes of old tweets from Grace Dent, pretty much taking the mickey out of Nigel's near-death plane crash some years ago. Sources close to Nigel said that they were disgusting and crass. So potentially fireworks on that front with Grace Dent. And also, as we've already previously discussed, Fred Siriex, the maitre from TV show First Dates, who is a French citizen living here in the UK, but also an ardent Remainer. So he has tweeted in previous years that Nigel's obsessed with his own voice and obsessed with money, and also a coward as well for backing the Brexit campaign. So potentially two characters already who Nigel may have to go on the charm offensive with in the early days of The Jungle. In terms of the trial, it all kicks off tonight. The very first episode, Nigel's been 2,000 miles away in the Australian outback, getting knee deep in sludge, grime and slime in what ITV have called a hellhole trial. So that's coming just hours away tonight, and it's going to set the theme for an explosive next 3 weeks.
And Ben, it's very interesting. There's another story today in the Mirror, and it's one of Nigel Farage's exes, who apparently is going to vote for him to win or lose
I think I've lost you there, Martin. I can't hear you, unfortunately.
OK, mate. Well, look, what it is that people, Remainers and even his ex, Nigel's ex, will be voting for him to lose every Bush Tucker trial, a bit like a repeat of Matt Hancock. But I suppose Nigel's used to slime and grime. He worked in Brussels. He's gone.
Oh, he's gone.
What a shame. Is it acceptable to wear that kind of a hat, or is that cultural appropriation?
I think I might just wear that around Westminster.
I think it's great. I think it's really
fun. It adds to the TV.
I tell you what, I think it's going to be a cracker of a show. And the thing is, right, you know, love him or hate him, Marmite character, Remain Brexit, whatever it is, it's going to be great box office.
Exactly, and it would be so interesting to see what the sort of younger generation make of him, the TikTok generation, as Nigel calls it, who don't really know anything about him. They'll be looking at him with open eyes, with a fresh slate. See what they make of him.
Well, we're about to go through all the news sports stories with Aidan McGee. But before we do that, Aidan, the Nigel story. I mean, I could see you there laughing away and chortling along. You like your celebrity stuff. I just think it's going to be great box office. They say they're going to boycott the show. No, they're not.
No, of course not. I mean, ITV will have made their own calculations based on including Nigel, and I think that over the course of time they'll get some payback on it. I would have thought. I mean, to me, it hasn't been that interesting since Harry Redknapp was in it. That was a great one. He won it quite comfortably.
2018, was it?
I think it was, yeah. But I think ITV, as I say, as with all these reality shows, ITV have to, or whoever runs them, not just ITV, it can be anyone, but they have to make a calculation based on who's in there, and the more fireworks it produces, the better the ratings. No question about that.
And when Harry Redknapp was on, I interviewed him a couple of Fridays ago about this. He likes to flutter.
Yes, he does.
You know, he's putting a few quid on Nigel. Nigel has gone from 7-1 to 6-1. He's now fourth favourite to win this. 5-2 de facto as the top two, in which case that would be, as I keep saying, that would be a de facto Brexit referendum. Look, you're here to talk about sport. Sorry, I'm excited.
Well, if Nigel wins, do you think he'll go up there and make that speech again and say, well, you know, you're not laughing now?
I think knowing Nigel, he'll have already written that speech, and no doubt it will contain quite a few bobs. Let's do a bit of sport. So let's start with Everton. We talked yesterday; they were docked 10 points, but it's getting even stickier for the Toffees.
Yeah, I mean, there's a story by Matt Hughes on the back of the Mail on Sunday this morning in the left-hand column. Basically, he said that this has been in the offing for a little while. There was an interim hearing prior to the punishment being handed down on Friday, where the possibility of 3 sides who are relegated in the last couple of years, so that would be Burnley in 2022. They've since come back to the Premier League, having won the Championship last season, and Leeds and Leicester, who were relegated last year. They will believe, or they do believe, that they lost their Premier League place on account of Everton gaining an advantage from their overspending which has caused this punishment in the first place. Now, if that happens, Matt says on the back of the Mail on Sunday, then they could be looking at a £300 million bill. Now, the new owners, who are set to be on the horizon at Everton, 777 Group, have earmarked £20 million per month to cope with all these kind of potential shock to the business as a result of this punishment. But that's not going to touch the sides if we're talking about a potential £300 million bill. If that gets landed at the door of Everton, then that will then push them. Well, not just that, but it also pushes them into administration. And when it pushes them into administration, that's another 9-point deduction. That, I suspect, will be applied next season. Then again, if they're not in the Premier League next season, how's it going to be done? It could be applied this season, which will just seal their fate.
Now, those other clubs are obviously going to be sniffing around for a bit of Wonga.
Of course.
That's the business of football.
Yeah.
Have they got a chance of doing this? If this goes through, Everton are finished.
David Phillips KC at that interim hearing I mentioned a few moments ago, he said, and it was a worthy question from the other clubs. He said they got a good case, and as an Everton fan, I'd be very worried. And this has a cyclical kind of vicious cycle effect actually, because you get into a serious position, you can't attract the players to get you out of trouble. They've got a stadium to pay for. For the benefit of our radio listeners, we saw the pictures of the stadium, Goodison Park, the grand old ground. They're leaving that next summer. They're meant to be moving into a stadium at Bramley Moor Dock. And so they've got these expenses. They've been affected by the Ukraine war because a lot of their sponsors pulled out. And this is a grand old club, as they like to call themselves. It's a big club. There are serious troubles ahead for them, even if they manage to get their 10-point punishment reduced.
And there's also been some mayhem in the F1 world, hasn't there?
That's putting it lightly. Yeah.
Well, let's concentrate on what's happened on the track in the last few minutes, because Max Verstappen has won. Again, that's the most boring stuff out of all this, because he wins every time there's a race. But he has, despite a penalty, he's gone ahead and won it. Charles Leclerc in second, and Sebastian Perez in third. Lewis Hamilton down in seventh. But yeah, there could be a class action. 35,000 fans here, we're talking, Olivia. They weren't able to see any action on Friday in qualifying or in practice. And so this is the problem when you bring these sports to nations that you're not really familiar with. Yes, they do have two other Grand Prix there, of course, in Miami and Austin, but it's quite litigious in America, isn't it? We want to crack it, but it's very litigious. Yep. And now 35,000 people have petitioned a court in Nevada, and this is the allegation. They said they're alleging breach of contract, negligence and deceptive trade practices. This is because the race was delayed, or the practice was delayed on Friday because of the manhole cover that we mentioned a short while ago, by 2.5 hours. And they were already at unsocial times anyway, and they didn't get to see any action, or not many of them saw any action anyway. And
a lot of high rollers in Las Vegas, a lot of deep pockets.
£500 million they spent there.
Very litigious, so this could get fruity.
Oh, without doubt. I mean, they spent £500 million. I mean, Verstappen's just won it. He's the one who said it was a circus on Friday, and he said he'd pull the whole thing down if he could. The racers aren't happy, although I don't know. I mean, I think if they're finishing about now in Vegas, they'll probably just make the clubs, won't they?
Yeah, super. That's when the fun starts.
They can blow their winnings in the casino.
Ed McGee, superb stuff. We've got to move on. Thank you very much. OK,
Cheers.
Lots more still to come this hour. It's jam-packed, but first, let's have a quick look at what the weather has in store.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to today, most of us seeing some further outbreaks of rain. There will be a little bit of brightness around, and for all, it will be mild. So as we start Sunday, probably not too bad initially across southeastern England. Some brightness here, but elsewhere rather grey with some outbreaks of rain. The rain potentially heavy in places. Going into the afternoon, best of brightness probably across eastern parts of Scotland. Southwestern England actually may also cheer up as the afternoon goes on, but quite blustery, especially down across southwestern England. Could see some coastal gales from time to time, but temperatures on the mild side in the south potentially up to 14 or 15 degrees. Into the night time, it does turn a little bit drier and clearer for a time across parts of England and eastern Wales, but elsewhere, further outbreaks of rain coming and going. It's still quite blustery across many western parts, but it will be another fairly mild night to come. So into Monday, we will see outbreaks of rain spreading their way southeastwards across the UK. Probably turning a little bit drier and brighter for a time across parts of Yorkshire and Lincolnshire. That may well sink its way into parts of the Midlands and East Anglia as the afternoon goes on. But elsewhere, a risk of rain really throughout much of the day, and feeling a little bit chillier down across western parts with that wind. Elsewhere, temperatures around average.
Now, a rabbi, an imam and a Catholic walk into GB News. No, that's not the start of a bad joke. That's the lineup for our next segment, where we would be discussing whether we can help heal the divides in our country via religion. It's going to be a fascinating conversation. Don't go anywhere.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 8:21. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Olivia and Martin.
Now, in a world increasingly filled with uncertainty, war and division, could religion offer a solution to help unify Britain and bring people together?
Well, let's hope so. Joining us now to discuss this are Rabbi Jonathan Romain, Imam Dr. Sheikh Ramsey and Catholic Voices spokeswoman Madeleine Page. Good morning to you all, and what a wonderful thing this is to do on a Sunday especially. Can I start with you, Rabbi Jonathan Romain? You join us. So we live in times that are sadly typified by division. How do you think we can start coming together to heal the rifts that we are currently seeing on the streets of Britain?
Well, I wouldn't put the position as bad as you put it. I think actually, despite the media attention about protests and counter-protests, most of us, most Muslims and Jews and Christians have more in common than divides us, whether it's the cost of living or the English football team results or rail strikes. And most Jews, Christians and Muslims, even if we disagree about certain things, and particularly at the moment about Israel-Gaza, we can agree to disagree. And in fact, just the other day, I got together with my local imam and vicar, and we said a joint prayer for peace, and it didn't change the world, but what we did do is give a message to our respective congregations that what's going on over in the Middle East is nothing religious, it's political, so it doesn't need to divide us, and also we're very, very clear that whatever the conflict going on over there, we shouldn't import it over here. So there are some difficulties at the moment, there are some tensions, it would be daft to deny it, but by and large, we're on the same page.
Yes, I believe, I'm sorry if you don't mind, I believe 100%, of course, I agree with the rabbi. He's a very close friend of mine. We see each other, many years that we're working together, and it does not, it should not affect us, something which happened outside, and we are all brothers, and of course, shalom, Rabbi, shalom, and may God bless you for that. Is a very, very important for us to keep the integration, to keep the cohesion cohesion, to keep the especially that three religion, which is a divine religion, together, because we believe in one God, and of course we keep each other and respect each other, care for each other. Care for each other in the time of, for example, some rabbis, some people come, and Jewish people come and say, we are a bit scared. I said, you shouldn't be, especially from the Muslim and anybody else's. Let's work together. It will pass. It definitely will pass, and we are all going to be stay together again. We had many conflicts before, which it passed. Muslim, Christian, Jew, and other staying together. We showed the integration, we showed the cohesion, we showed the brotherhood, we showed the good of the religion, how it can be merciful and brothers and sisters together. Rabbi's children is like my children is like a rabbi children. Absolutely, there is no doubt about it, and the Christian as well.
Okay, Madeline, let's bring you in on that point, because that sounds great. You know, brotherly love, coming together, all of us want that, but that's not happening at the moment, and we do have some tensions. What can be done about that?
I think from the Christian perspective, it's forgiveness. That's what we are taught to do, and that doesn't mean forgive and forget, but that's turning the other cheek. And it's not easy. It's constantly making the choice to forgive. I believe forgiveness is a choice, and what makes it harder is if you forgive someone and then they commit a wrong to you again, we're still called to continue to forgive and to have that constant flow of love, of kindness and charity towards that person. And I think that's something that unites many faiths, that we come from this place of love, of, love thy neighbour. It's, we learn it in primary school, don't we? The golden rule. And I think that needs to, we need to be reminded of that.
I think, Madeline, just staying with you here for a minute, for the first time last year, less than 50% of the country identified as religious at all, and we're expecting to see that number continue to decline. As you say, I mean, all the major world religions preach a message of peace, love thy neighbour, etc. But with more and more people turning away from religion altogether, are those values sort of disappearing in our culture?
I think perhaps, although I think regardless of your religion, I think we can be unified in our humanity. There's a really beautiful quote from Pope John Paul II where he says, regardless of your state in life, regardless of your calling, as human beings, we are all called to the sort of the fundamental principle of humanity and of recognising that humanity in others. Now, I may, as a Christian, may say that that's because I see Jesus Christ present in every single person. But even if I am of no faith, we are all human, and that is something that is very important and unifying.
Can I bring you back in now, Rabbi Jonathan Romain? What kind of things are you hearing from the Jewish community in synagogues now, just in conversation, in your friendship circles? Because we hear a lot in the media about the rise in anti-Semitism. We hear a lot of concern. We saw some terrible stories of children too afraid to wear their blazers or go to school, of vandalism. A lot of people saying London in particular feels unsafe. Is that being echoed, or are these bad messages being signal boosted too much?
Well, there's two answers to that. The one is, yes, at the moment that's true, and there's a genuine worry that, yes, of course, people can have different views about Palestine and Israel and Gaza. The trouble is when anti-Israel views morph over into anti-Jewish views, and when people for peace start using slogans like "from the river to the sea," which actually, although it sounds poetic, means the extinction of Israel and therefore the extinction of all Jews. So we're worried by that sort of rhetoric, which isn't helpful. But going on to the positive side, it's not just enough to sort of say nice things, like the three of us have done. That the real way forward is to do things together. And you're quite right, religion is going down in this country in terms of attendance. But that's religious worship. People aren't into praying and kneeling and bowing. What they are more into is sort of religious values. such as social justice or kindness or charity, as Madeline's just been saying. So, for instance, today is actually a very significant day across all faiths. It's called Mitzvah Day or Good Deed Day. And actually, in my synagogue and synagogues around the country, we are doing good deeds, not just for ourselves, but for the wider British community. And we're doing it with local Christians and local Muslims, such as going to local parks and removing the rubbish, going visiting people in care home who don't normally get a visit, or cooking for local food banks. And we're doing this as Jews because that's part of our Jewish faith, but we've invited local Christians to do it together. So it's not just, we're moving beyond nice cups of friendly tea, but going into positive social action together. And by working together, by squelching in the mud in parks together and picking up leaves or rubbish or plastic bottles, we're actually really bringing religion into everyday action and seeing the positive side, even if there are political differences that annoy us every now and then.
And Dr. Sheikh Ramzi, yes. I saw you nodding along there.
Yes, what we have, of course, again, I agree with our brother Rabbi. What we have, the important thing is, of course, he said what instead of course, we are brothers and sisters, and so on, so on, so on. So what else we can do at the moment? We cannot ignore what is happening in the state of Israel and Palestine or Gaza, and of course, we can see, for example, whole world coming to ask for the ceasefire, and the ceasefire is in my heart, and of course many countries. Therefore,
but the whole world isn't asking for a ceasefire with the greatest respect.
Yeah.
The whole world isn't.
But I'm talking about where we're talking about when I can see the majority, maybe majority, few are there. But the ceasefire is if you think about the humanitarian. For example, when we had to the Ukraine, the mother and children all gone out. You understand? All mother children come out. But why they don't, for example, we say, why they don't let the mother and children come out and after that do something which they want to? Mother and children, I don't think they are going to be involved in the Hamas, or so we call it. Therefore, what we need to do, and another thing is that, of course, I would like to tell the rabbi, and I get the Rabbi Mervis, the chief rabbi, which is a friend of mine, God bless him, he's an excellent man. We want to say, for example, when you say these people are animal, you know, these people, for example, many of these people are animal, and we have to treat him as animal. This is wrong, because I remember, of course, one of the what's this called, MPs, Leila Moran, but she's got a sister, he's got a mother there. Yeah. The mothers and the families and the SMPs, but she got a family there. Are their families animal? Is his mother animal? And while he is there, these are something which hurt us. And we would like to ask.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I just want to interject, Dr. Ramzi. A great many people will be saying the responsible thing to do at the moment, from an imam such as yourself, is to call for calm.
Absolutely.
Within the Muslim community, because like it or not, we can sit around and talk sweet words and talk about brotherhood and coming together.
Absolutely.
But on the streets, there are tensions. We see them every Saturday. Yesterday we saw them nationwide.
That's right.
So what kind of calling for calm messages are you putting out?
I would like to say, of course, the common message, especially in these countries, respect the Jews, respect the Christians, respect the religion, is passes. This will passes, the conflict passes. And of course, just respect. Be careful for them, as I am saying, the imam of the, for example, imam of one of the representative Muslim in the United Kingdom, I come and say, respect these brothers. These children are like my children because they are all innocent. Therefore, it is a way which we can go forward. We can tell the people. However, when they can see in the television and radio and so on, which they call their family animal or their family, that may not help. Therefore, we would like to say, of course, I'm asking my rabbi and Rabbi Mervis, which are very powerful people, I can say, perhaps you advise the government of Israel, which see what he says, you know, bring attention down. If they bring attention down there, and after that, we sort it out here as well. But if they want to make it as an animal and is a non-Muslim and a subhuman, it may not work. work, because I can't, no matter how many, it is 4 million Muslim here, and especially young, and as they see this happening, they see these children, for example, get damaged and killed, and so.
But then, can I interject again? I'm sorry.
Yes.
We also saw pictures of young Muslim people, particularly in London, ripping down those posters of Israeli children that have been kidnapped. I'm sorry to put difficult questions to you,
yes.
but we must accept that this is happening and it is causing tensions. And I just put to you again, the responsible thing to do is to call for calm.
Absolutely. We are always calling for calm. We are always calling integration, brotherhood, especially Muslim, Jews and Christian, because we have these are divine religion, and we have a one God. Therefore we ask all. At the moment, I'm on TVs, I'm asking all brothers and sisters, Muslim brothers and sisters, respect. They are not, these are something happening in Israel and Gaza, but they are not, they should not be, they should affected in this country. We are loving religious people, which we love the Christian, love the Jews, love the Muslim, and the other one which is come to our religion. If I do not believe that, for example, the Jewish religion and the Christian religion, I am not a Muslim. Therefore, if anybody asks me, are you Muslim and Christian and Jew? I say, I am the three. Because it is in our Holy Quran, and we love them as well. Of course, what we need to do again, both sides, it works both sides.
Yeah.
The Jewish people should respect as well, should help. Help. We all helping together is a unity. You cannot point to the Muslims say doing that.
Okay, Olivia.
Can I just ask what you make of that, Jonathan? Do you think the Jewish community too has a role to play in this?
Yeah, in fact, I can give a very good example of the way forward, because last week there was a joint, not demonstration, but gathering actually at 10 Downing Street, Jews, Christians and Muslims, and we said, right, we're going to come together, we're going to call for peace, and we're going to have no slogans, no banners, no flares, but we're really going to sort of concentrate on the problem, which is bringing peace. We're not going to attack each other. And that way, we try to divest, we try to detoxify the demonstrations and concentrate what's really important, which is not slagging off each other, but calling for peace, both there and, of course, here on the streets of London too.
Madeleine, of course, this conflict has really brought into the spotlight the point at where religion and politics meet. And we've had, the Archbishop of Canterbury weighing in, as he's weighed in before, on other issues that some people think are political. And I've heard quite a lot of Christians, quite often conservative Christians, who think that it's not really the role of someone like the Archbishop of Canterbury to weigh into a crisis like this with a sort of overtly political message. Would you agree with them, or do you think that it is the role of religious leaders to have a political say on the important issues of the day?
I think we have a say insofar as it is what our religion teaches, and ultimately a lot of politics is morality, it's ethics, it's how do we treat each other within our country, and we can't as Christians, as Muslims, as Jews, we can't necessarily separate that. So sometimes it may manifest itself in particular opinions that can be political, but I think the root of it underneath is what are our beliefs, what do we think is right and wrong, and how are we going to facilitate that within the governance of a country. And I just to sort of echo what both of you are saying, I think it's so important to remember that this situation in Israel and Gaza has a very, very complicated history, and there is no one individual on the streets of Britain who is solely responsible for this. It's very complex. It goes back decades, some might say millennia, and we need to remember that not get sort of caught up in the emotion, which is a very human response and very easy to do, but exactly as they both said, bring that peace and that service.
OK, today is a coming together and we're trying to find peace. Could I ask each of you in turn, if you had one message to the nation of how we could come together, what would that be? Can I start with you, please, Rabbi Jonathan Romain?
I think all faiths share that famous line, love your neighbour as yourself. It rolls off the tongue very easily. We don't always do it. So why not try doing that today? Love your neighbour as yourself. Leave for 24 hours, see how it works.
Excellent message. Thank you very much. And what about you, Madeleine?
I'd say forgiveness. That doesn't mean forgetting, but continue to forgive, regardless of the harm that's been done. Take a deep breath and just forgive.
And finally, Dr. Sheikh.
Yes, I believe, of course, no hate, love and peace for all people, and especially the religious. We have a Muslim, Christian, and Jewish, the religion of God. And of course, another thing, the last thing I would say, I pray to Almighty God for all, and I pray to Almighty God to bring a peace to the whole world, especially the Gaza and the Israel, which they should live together in peace, in the two-state solution by the grace of Almighty God.
OK, well, the three of you, a fantastic Sunday sermon, and hopefully we can see some coming together and some common ground. Thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Rabbi Jonathan Romain down the line, and in the studio, Imam Dr. Sheikh Ramsey and Catholic Voices spokeswoman Madeleine Page. Fantastic stuff. Thank you very much. Now,
Pleasure.
we've got loads more coming up on the show. Please stay with us.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 8:42 and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Well, joining us now to go through some of the day's headlines is the author and journalist Susan Holder and showbiz reporter and broadcaster Stephanie Tetchy. But first, let's have a look at what's made the front pages this morning.
Well, the Daily Mail leads with their special investigation into the gang rapists deported back to Somalia.
And the Express, meanwhile, leads with the manhunt underway for 6 terror suspects on the loose in Britain.
The Mirror leads with the report claiming £100 billion of taxpayers' money has been wasted by the Tories.
And the Sun's front page features sick tweets made by I'm a Celebrity Grace Dent, who, of course, is a guest in the show, who's having a pop at Nigel. Come back to haunt her.
And the Daily Star leads with Boffin's claims you could bust that beer belly by munching berries. A classic Daily Star headline there.
Yeah, and I want that story, please explain to me, because I could do with some of those berries. If they're magic, even better. Steph, let's start with, I absolutely love this story. This was sent to me by my brother-in-law last night. He was like, here we go again, more rank hypocrisy from the BBC.
I think it's so unfair, this story. So the BBC have come under attack again for a new Panorama episode that they filmed with a reporter called Richard Bilton, who's based in London. He's racked up 20,000 worth of air miles trying to find out the answer to the question of why, despite all the green promises, we're using more fossil fuels than ever. So the BBC are being accused of rank hypocrisy, as you're saying, which I think is unfair.
Why is it unfair? He's banged to rights.
Because he's trying to investigate this. He can't be doing this over Zoom, as BBC have said. It's about going to the places, getting the report, speaking to people. So I think this is unfair. When we're talking
about... The problem is there are reporters locally in all those areas, aren't there? That's the problem that you've got, that the BBC have, you know, squads everywhere that they could have called on, I suppose, is the argument.
Yeah,
I don't know. And also, I haven't heard before of Richard Bilton. It's a shame that this is the way he's made his name, by being accused of rank hypocrisy. But I don't know why it was specifically had to be him. Maybe it did, though.
That's what
Maybe
I wonder.
it did.
It's not like he's a huge name that's going to bring in all the viewers. Why couldn't they have just used local?
As you'd expect, critics are like saying he's been sent on a one-man jolly. And the carbon... the CO2 that's been belched out by this globe-trotting trip
is 5.4 tonnes.
And that's akin to the entire CO2 you or I, every man and woman, kicks out in this country in an entire year. I think he's been banged to rights.
No, I don't agree with that. I think it's a one-man investigation. I think as reporters were sent on
paid for by taxpayers.
And eventually, if we make a problem with this, it means in the whole journalism industry, people are going to start questioning, why do you have to go there? Why do you have to go there?
Yeah, that's true. We don't want people saying, you can stay at home, zoom it in. We don't want, you can't go anywhere, because we don't want that either. It could tip too far. You're told you could never go and report somewhere because of your carbon emissions.
I think that's true, and I do think we get into some problems when quite often I see these, often in the Mirror, actually, not to single them out, but front page headlines saying Liz Truss racked up, 15,000 air miles when she was Foreign Secretary. I mean, that was her job.
That is the job, exactly.
And you've got a fair point. We've, after all, just sent Ben Leo to the Gold Coast to cover our night. But we're not banging on about climate change like he says.
And you don't have somebody stationed permanently in Australia, I don't think, for GB News. So.
And this report says...
Maybe we could apply for that job. I don't know.
This report says in his comment, they say one thing and do another. Yeah, so do you, mate. Bang to rights. Suze, let's move on to your story. Airstrikes on crowded UN shelters.
Yes, so the front page of The Observer is talking about the airstrikes on UN shelters in North Gaza's Jabalia refugee camp. It is obviously just a terrible situation, and it's underlying that nowhere is safe in Gaza. They do give out, obviously, the Israeli army do give out the warnings, which is obviously more than Hamas do whenever they do anything. But at the same time, they've told everyone to go south, and now they're even kind of in danger down there. And I don't understand where they are meant to go, despite the war. You can warn as much as you want, but if you've got nowhere to run to, what do you do then?
I mean, it's such a difficult... This is such an awful humanitarian crisis. It's a very difficult job for the Israeli army, because obviously they want to protect their country. But as we know, Hamas embeds itself among the civilian population. And so there isn't really anywhere to use sort of targeted drones.
But apparently, I mean, everything that the Israeli government do, that they have, all the advisors, like they do try and stick within the United Nations laws and everything. But at the same time, a bomb is a bomb, and once it's gone off and there's people around, whoever they are, there's no limit to what the damage is.
Growing cost of human life now with these strikes, and I'm just like, what are they achieving now? It's been over a month. I don't think they've got any closer to tackling Hamas. So what is the goal here? To kill as many innocent people as possible?
I think one problem as well, which we haven't really talked about, is quite apart from the human life crisis, we're going to be heading for a massive refugee crisis. I think that Gaza, if I'm right, is pretty much the most populated place on the planet. If it is sort of flattened as horribly we are now expecting, what's going to happen to all the people?
Well, that's a great question. And why is it that Egypt or the Arabian nations around there aren't opening their borders to the Palestinian refugees? That is a huge question. Not ordinarily, we saw with Ukraine, the displaced people normally go into the nearest countries until it's safe to return. That's not happening here because they don't seem to want to let them through. Shall we move on to something else? You've got a bit of showbiz for us, Suze?
Let's go gear change, Gear change. So I did watch. Anyone else watch Strictly Come Dancing last night? Live from Blackpool, where they were... Are we at the quarter-final stage yet? It's getting quite far into the competition, isn't it? Anyway, the story in today's Sun is all about Ellie Leach, who for me is the star of the show. She did a Charleston last night with her partner Vito, and I don't understand why it didn't get 40. Craig was being very mean to everybody last night and would refuse to hold that number 10 panel up.
OK, I think we've got a quick video we can throw to you now to have a look, so judge for yourself. Let's have a look.
Pretty good to me.
Because it was at Blackpool, you have so many more dancers taking part, so they actually have to dance alongside the professionals, the celebrities, which is a real test. And I actually bumped into Ellie's mum in Manchester at the theatre just a couple of weeks ago, and she was telling me how proud she was, obviously, of Ellie. And if you recognise her, but you're not sure where from, she was in Coronation Street. She played Windass. What was her name? Faye Windass. And actually, in that, she was a great little actress, but she always had quite kind of downbeat storylines. They gave her the early menopause. She was always crying. And to see her...
She's really blossomed.
She's really blossomed. She's come on so much. Her mum said to me that when she came... excuse me. When she first went to kind of see the lineup of the people she was competing with, she saw all the other girls doing it and went, oh, I'm kind of like, I'm not as slim as them and I'm not as blonde and as glamorous as them. And there she is now, absolutely
rocking it.
Rocking it. And I think she might win.
In Blackpool, the home of dance. Let's move on to another story. If we get another clunking change of gear. Can we get back to the Express front page?
Yes.
Which we've been flagging all morning. We haven't gone into detail. I think a lot of people out there would be fascinated to learn about this. 6 suspected terrorists landed in Britain via small dinghies after crossing the Channel, and they've simply gone missing in Britain.
They have, and it's quite frightening when you hear these stories because they tend to go under the radar and no one wants to kind of really let the general public know what's happening on our shores when it comes to terrorists landing in Britain. So at the moment we have 6 who have entered via our shores. 3 of them security services are keeping an eye on because they may have close links to other terror cells. 3 of them have gone missing. So in total at the moment we've got 25 terrorist suspects in the country, which I think is 25 too many.
That's what we know about.
That is the ones we know about. And I think what's awful about this is it's always when a terrorist attack happens, you hear, oh, security services had been watching these people, but they still manage to slip under the radar and commit so many atrocities. And it's just very unsettling. I think at the moment everyone's banging on about Rwanda, but we're forgetting what's actually happening. The migrants who are in the country, not the ones who've come from sad circumstances, but the one who have, very kind of bad intentions for the country.
Well, absolutely. And as you say, I mean, it's not just about the migrants who are coming in over the Channel day by day. It's about that backlog of migrants. I mean, we're looking at a 435-day average time for a migrant's asylum claim to be processed. So there's this huge, huge bottleneck. And what are these people up to?
You can see the front page there. Look, terror cell sneaks in on small boats. I mean, Suze, this is bad at any time, but at the moment, we find ourselves the target of international anger because of Britain's association, our allyship with Israel. So for this to be happening now is unforgivable.
It is unforgivable. And if you can't stop the boats coming over, which we don't seem to be able to do, at least we could stop them. You know, once they're actually on the shore, you have to then, you know, detain them, arrest them, question them, track them, do whatever you... No, just let people, as apparently that has been reported in the papers today, arrive on a beach and then get into a waiting car and just drive off. And people in Kent are filming that happening. And it's an absolute national scandal. And it is so scary that we don't know what these people are doing and where they're going, but we don't think they've come to do kind of, you know, amazingly wonderful things and rescue the country and work in the National Health Service.
And we're too busy trying to fight the Supreme Court to send them to Rwanda after the Supreme Court have said no 4 times. You know. And
we've seen instances before where violent criminals were prevented from being deported on flights, for example, to Jamaica. In fact, Keir Starmer and a lot of Labour luminaires, including Diane Abbott, got involved in that one. And it just makes you wonder, you know, we don't seem to be able to control who's going in, and we can't control how to get them out.
No. To be honest, I hate saying this, but I just feel like it's a losing battle, Martin. Every time I hear about trying to deal with the migrants crisis, I've heard about this for many years, and I'm just like, do we just accept this is the crisis
I don't believe a word of that. I don't believe that isn't. I don't believe that is what we do. I don't believe it can't be done. I think other countries... We're an island surrounded by sea. Would you think that would not help us? I mean, having said that, I think Germany's situation is very bad, and people do stream into those kind of countries as well. But given that we are an island, we don't seem to have kind of made the most of that.
I think increasingly politically, people are talking in Westminster about just we have to rewrite those international human rights laws,
that takes forever.
Made for a different era. Exactly.
It takes forever, and we don't seem to be able to ever get there. We seem stymied all the way.
It's the legal challenges as well, isn't it? It's kind of looking at that people can't just prevaricate and extend their kind of arguments. You know, that's the kind of thing you need to look at.
OK, ladies, we have to leave it there. Superb stuff. Steph Tecci, Susan Holder. As we approach the top of the hour, we've got much more to come. But first, here's your weather.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to today, most of us seeing some further outbreaks of rain. There will be a little bit of brightness around, and for all, it will be mild. So as we start Sunday, probably not too bad initially across southeastern England, some brightness here, but elsewhere rather grey with some outbreaks of rain. The rain potentially heavy in places. Going into the afternoon, best of brightness probably across eastern parts of Scotland. Southwestern England actually may also cheer up as the afternoon goes on, but quite blustery, especially down across southwestern England. Could see some coastal gales from time to time, but temperatures on the mild side in the south potentially up to 14 or 15 degrees. Into the night time, it does turn a little bit drier and clearer for a time across parts of England and eastern Wales, but elsewhere, further outbreaks of rain coming and going. It's still quite blustery across many western parts, but it will be another fairly mild night to come. So into Monday, we will see outbreaks of rain spreading their way southeastwards across the UK. Probably turning a little bit drier and brighter for a time across parts of Yorkshire and Lincolnshire. That may well sink its way into parts of the Midlands and East Anglia as the afternoon goes on. But elsewhere, a risk of rain really throughout much of the day, and feeling a little bit chillier down across western parts with that wind. Elsewhere, temperatures around average.
Now, could the Chancellor be about to cut taxes? Well, reports suggest Jeremy Hunt is mulling a cut in inheritance tax. We'll discuss this when we return. Stay with us.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m.
We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Can you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock on Sunday the 19th of November, and these are the big stories we've been covering today.
The Chancellor is weighing up a surprise tax cut to woo voters as the election draws closer. Labour continues to dominate in the polls, with debt and spending out of control.
And I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here is set for a dramatic launch tonight with GB News star Nigel Farage in the spotlight. We'll be live down under throughout the day here on GB News.
Days where you call the police and no one shows up could be over, as plans are revealed to test drones to show up to emergencies, giving police more information.
And a rabbi, an imam and a Catholic walked into GB News. No, that's not the start of a bad joke. That was the lineup that we had in the last hour, where we discussed whether we can heal the divides in our country. If you missed it, you can catch it online on our YouTube channel.
And in our feature, your stories, as we talk to Sarah Hope, whose life changed forever following a road accident, but has since campaigned and provided support for others who have suffered similar incidents. That's in just a moment.
And Craig will have your latest weather forecast.
Good morning. Many of us saw some rain on Saturday. What does the weather have in store for the second half of the weekend? Find out in a little bit.
I'm Olivia Utley.
And I'm Martin Daubney, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Well, it's been a dramatic week in politics, from the Supreme Court judgment that ruled sending asylum seekers to Rwanda as unlawful, to the former Home Secretary Suella Braverman launching an incredible attack on the Prime Minister in her bombshell resignation letter.
Yeah, it's been a tough week for the Prime Minister. However, he remains adamant that flights will go ahead as his government prepares for emergency legislation, as his Chancellor also prepares for the autumn statement next week.
And a North Devon MP has called on the government to honour its 2019 manifesto commitment and ban the import of hunting trophies. The bill has already gone through at the House of Commons, but plans to make it onto the statute book have been thwarted by the House of Lords.
OK, before we go to that, we're going to come to Camilla Tomley, who's hosed the interview, looking resplendent.
Thank you so much, Martin.
Now,
thank
we're
you.
going to talk about that sensational week, almost a nightmare week. They're talking about the annus horribilis for Rishi Sunak. It has to be up there. It's a very, very worst week of his life.
Well, although, do we reflect on it and say it was a really bad week for Suella Braverman? At the end of the day, she's the one out of a job. She's given her first interview to the Mail on Sunday today. Hasn't gone that much further. I mean, you can't really, when you have a bombshell resignation as she did and wrote that excoriating letter to the Prime Minister, basically attacking his leadership, then that poses problems. Some interesting analysis in today's papers, a lot of it effectively concluding that while this might be the right policy, is Rwanda as a country the problem? Lord Sumption writes in the Sunday Times and says, in a way, the idea of the government bringing in this legislation to say that Rwanda is safe when the Supreme Court says it isn't might not change the dial. I've got the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, coming on at the beginning of the show. He's going to hopefully talk us through some of the reports of what he's going to do on Wednesday. I say that hopefully. They send chancellors out before a budget or an autumn statement.
And then they sit there saying, absolutely nothing I can say about this.
So I'm going to ask him, are you going to scrap IHT, as has been reported? Are you going to unfreeze the tax rate bans? That's significant because hundreds and thousands of people are being fiscally dragged into these higher rates.
Teachers, nurses, people who were never supposed to be in the upper tax.
And they're getting their they're getting their wage rises, as the government is proudly saying, but at the same time it's being wiped out by what they're giving back to the Exchequer. So I'll be talking to him about that. I'm also going to be speaking to Darren Jones from Labour. They've come up with this press release how they're going to save households various amounts of cash. I'm going to ask him, well, how are you costing this? Because some of the finer details are absent from that press release. Shock. And then we've got Kwasi Kwarteng coming in to analyse both what Mr Hunt is going to be telling me and indeed Mr Jones, and say to him, well, it's a year on from the mini-budget. I'm wondering whether this whole week is going to be a little triggering for him. But what would he do if he was in the Chancellor's place?
Well, no doubt he would be cutting tax. There's been an interesting reaction to it across the papers. The Observer, as you'd imagine, saying this is going to be a nasty party tax grab.
Yes.
They're going to squeeze benefits and give it away as an inheritance tax windfall to the elite, to the toffs.
Well,
so
that's the IHT reaction, although they'll say that actually the left always says inheritance tax is barely paid by but the reason why it's politically significant is lots of people think they will have to pay it. And also on the benefit stuff, actually he's saying that he's going to cut the benefits, or at least say to people who can't be bothered to look for work, who can't be bothered to go to the job centre, actually you're not going to be able to keep on claiming universal credit ad infinitum. I would imagine the GB News audience is quite in favour of a clamp down on people who are choosing worklessness as a lifestyle choice.
Absolutely, quite possibly the country as a whole, because it's only those people who are fit to work that he's planning on clamping.
Yeah, it's not talking about people with disabilities or indeed even touching people on child benefits. So, again, I think the Observer's giving this some convenient spin.
As ever, superb, a great menu ahead, Camilla Tomley. That's from 9:30. Don't go away. But before that, now we are talking about a North Devon MP has called for the government to honour its 2019 manifesto commitment and ban the import of hunting trophies. The bill has already gone through the House of Commons, but plans to make it onto the statute book have been thwarted by the House of Lords.
Our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody explains. We'd like to warn you that the following story contains images that may be disturbing.
It's a sport not many can stomach, hunting down wild animals in order to bring them home as trophies. The government was committed to helping end the practice, but so far not much progress has been made. Selene Saxby, North Devon's MP, says she's frustrated.
We committed to it in our manifesto for 2019, and the bill has gone the whole way through the House of Commons. It's got immense public support, and it has been blocked in the Lords by delaying tactics. So we're really just asking the Prime Minister to do what we said we'd do and get Henry Smith's bill through the House again.
It was a private member's bill led by Conservative MP Henry Smith, but 11 peers stymied the bill in the House of Lords, tabling 60 amendments in a bid to frustrate progress.
It's always difficult as Conservatives to be banning things altogether, but I think it's also, this is about conservation. These are species that we know are in decline, and we know that what's driving the trade in hunting them is the fact you can bring back the trophy. And so we know there's been 25,000 dead animals brought over in the last couple of decades. You know, this is something that isn't a small matter. And for these endangered species, it really is important.
Dilys Rowe is from the International Institute for Environment and Development. She believes banning trophy hunting would be a mistake.
Hunting
provides really good benefits for conservation, particularly in terms of the amount of land that it incentivises to be kept for wildlife because of the money that it brings in. So while it seems like killing individual animals is not a good thing for conservation, actually the greater benefit of having that land conserved really is positive for conservation. Currently, in most of the places where trophy hunting takes place, there are very few, if any, alternatives that would bring in income for that land. So people often say, well, why can't we just have photo tourism instead? That means no animals have to get killed. But actually hunting happens in places where phototourism is quite often not viable. Quite often it happens in very remote areas where it's difficult to get large numbers of tourists to, or it happens in places that are just not attractive for tourists. I mean, tourists want to go places where they can virtually be guaranteed to see wildlife. Hunters go to places where you actually have to hunt wildlife, track it down, it's hard to find, that's all part of the hunting experience. So actually some of those inhospitable areas that are not good for phototourism are the areas that are perfect for trophy hunting. So it's a great complementary source of revenue alongside tourism.
The bill is certainly popular. 82% of British voters say trophy hunting should be banned. But the chances of the government finding time to wade through 60 amendments is getting remoter by the day. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Well, coming up, it's time for your stories. And this week we'll be meeting Sarah Hope, whose life changed forever after a traffic accident. That's next on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back. It's 9:12 and you're watching and listening to Breakfast with Olivia and Martin.
Yeah, so let's have now some of the top stories coming up in the GB newsroom this morning. Firstly, MPs have criticised the shocking lack of detail provided by ministers on the crumbling concrete crisis in schools as they warned about the alarming state of classroom buildings.
And energy regulator Ofcom will announce its latest price cap on Thursday, with energy consultants predicting a 5% jump to take effect from January to March. The forecast suggests that the typical bill will then fall to just over $1,800 from the start of April, but will not drop below today's level until July next year.
And 37 minibuses and electric vehicles have been provided to Albania by the British government at a cost of £1.5 million as part of a recent deal to return Albanian prisoners. The arrangement will see 200 jailed Albanian nationals sent back to their home country, as the British government says it wants to help modernise the Albanian prison system.
Well, today is the World Day of Remembrance for road traffic victims. And on this day, we have a truly heartbreaking story to share with you all.
In 2007, Sarah Hope, her mother and her 2-year-old daughter were hit by a bus when they were on the way to visit a relative in hospital. Sarah's mother sadly died and her daughter lost her leg.
Well, Sarah is with us in the studio now. And Sarah, thank you so much for coming in. It's obviously absolutely awful what you had to go through, but it's fantastic that you've made your tragedy into this brilliant campaign now.
Yes, I've set up a petition that road crash victims get more care and more understanding with the justice system, and I think there's many things that need to change within the criminal justice system for road crash victims. And I think one thing's very important is we don't call it accident anymore, because accident actually mitigates liability. Because if you think about it, there's like on average 5 road crash deaths a day in the UK. That's about 150 people a month. That's a lot of people. And so many of these terrible crashes and collisions are preventable because they are caused by criminal drivers. So many laws need to change, and so many things that the Ministry of Justice say they're going to do need to be enforced to help road crash victims and give them much more support.
And like many people who suddenly find their life changing direction, you're a campaigner now, it's because of a tragic incident. Would you mind reflecting on that moment and just describe what happened to you and how it's changed your life forever?
It was the most gorgeous sunny day. I was on the way to the hospital to visit my sister who just had a baby. My mother, Elizabeth, had come to stay, and we went to... my daughter was 2 at the time, but she was very agile and she didn't want to be in her pushchair. So she was holding my mother's hand, and we entered the bus depot in Mortlake. And a bus literally just crashed straight into us. He sped onto the pavement. And that was an act of road rage.
How do you mean it was an act of rage? What happened?
There was a van honking at him from behind, and instead of turning right into the bus depot, he just ploughed onto the pavement.
And so that's why you're so keen to change this word around accident, because this clearly wasn't nothing but...
That was not an accident, and so many road crashes are caused by speeding, people holding their mobile phone, fiddling with the radio, they're driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Hit-and-run drivers. You know, these crashes are not accidents. They're caused by people who know that when they're going to sit behind the wheel of a car or a vehicle, they can hurt and injure someone.
The bus driver who destroyed your family life, I mean, what punishment did he receive for that?
He then got 3 years in prison.
3 years in prison.
And I don't know, as a family, I don't know what's happened to him. I don't know.
3 years.
Yes. But a lot of times, I think people who are... you have to be convicted of a criminal offence before your licence is taken away. So, you know, people can do terrible things on the road and then they may get penalty points, but often their licence isn't taken away. The sentences are very lenient. So it's not really serving as a deterrent for dangerous drivers.
I know your latest campaign is about reframing the way that road traffic accidents, road traffic victims are treated. But I know you've been doing some really incredible work. I've been following what you've been doing a little bit over the last sort of 10, 15 years. You've now got an OBE. Can you talk to us a little bit about what else you've been doing?
I've got an MBE.
MBE, I'm sorry, I've downgraded you.
It doesn't matter. Well, I've done, because Pollyanna became an amputee, so I've campaigned a lot for amputees, and now all amputee children in this country have running blades. But I've also set up something called the Sarah Hope line, which is an instant support line with Transport for London. So that helps people in London who are... But that started for road crash victims, but now that's transpired. We're helping people on London Transport Network as well. But this petition is really because road crash victims are really at the bottom of the pile, I think, for the Ministry of Justice. You know, the King's speech, you know, it talks about victims of homicides and stabbings and domestic violence issues, which is so important, and I would never, ever downgrade that. But, you know, I have been told by government ministers in the past with my campaigning, oh, you're not a victim of crime. But I was a victim of crime.
A victim of crime.
But because I was seen as not a victim of crime, I didn't... There's something called the Victims' Code of Practice, which sets out all the rights that victims of crime should have. And road crash victims, they're not... It's not legally enforceable. It's written by the Ministry of Justice, but it's not legally enforceable. So victims are not getting the kindness, the support they need.
And you know what? The sort of thing that get you is the detail. And there's this line here. Pollyanna was 2 at the time. I pushed the pram and she held her precious grand's hand. And then things change forever.
Oh. Yeah.
Even better.
But...
I mean,
she was 2 at the time. She was young. Kids have resilience. She's an amputee, but she's gone on to great things. Look, wonderful picture there.
Yeah. She's gone on to be a dancer, so she's so amazing, and we're so proud of her. But then, you know, in this country, she gets the help that she needs, which is why we help children in Sierra Leone and Africa now. But the criminal justice system, it takes so long. It doesn't look after people. You know, there are so many problems with the criminal justice system, and that's why I've set up this petition. Because I meet a lot of road crash victims, and I still, even 17 years on, I still hear the most heartbreaking stories.
And how do you feel as a campaigner? You know, I'm so fascinated by you went through such trauma that's evident with your daughter every time you see her, yet you're immersing yourself in campaigning for others. What drives you to do that? Does that not traumatise you again? Or is the fact that because you've been through what you've been through, you feel you can help and you understand and empathise and help them to deal with it?
Well, sometimes, yeah, I do. As time goes on, sometimes I think, oh, I can't tell my story again. I can't keep talking about it. But I have to talk about it to make things change. Because if people that have been through bad things don't talk about their experiences, the people like you can't understand. So I have to talk about it, and I do find it hard.
Yeah.
But it's not really acceptable. It's not acceptable that, say, for example, the Ministry of Justice says they are helping all victims of crime under the Victims' Code of Practice, when they're not. So the Victims' Code of Practice is meant to help give people advice about their police... If you're a road crash victim, you may be seriously injured. At the same time, you may have to be going through civil litigation. You might be...
The mental strain, of course, must be unbelievable.
You've got a criminal investigation, police investigations, everything going on all at once. And that's taking years.
And you've got no one to support you through the whole process. I mean, it's shocking.
And if people, you know, you know, they have to have a lawyer and English isn't their first language and they can't understand what's going on. I'm worried they might be exploited in the system, as they often are. It takes too long. And also, you know, the numbers of road crashes in this country, you know, they're huge.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's absolutely incredible that you do keep telling your story. And I'm ashamed to say I've always talked about road traffic accidents, and I won't again. So
if there's anything I can do today, it's not to call them accidents, because they are not accidents. Not if they're caused by a criminal driver. And most people, you know, we should be really, really careful all the time. Put our phones in our bags and leave them. But it's not just that. It's jumping red lights. It's speeding. There's so many.
And I think telling your story, you know, helps people to understand. All of us are responsible when we get behind the wheel of a vehicle, because it's something that can impact and cause devastation. So we just have to have that awareness and that respect for what it can potentially do.
We need to have respect for your vehicle and remember it's bigger than a person.
What would you like to see change moving forward? You talk about more awareness, talk about the criminal justice system, but in terms of like some of the tough learnings you've had, what needs to change?
Well, so my petition, which I hope people will sign, is for there to be a victims commission for road crash victims, because there are so many people involved in these road crashes, and somebody needs to hold the government to account to make the laws to change. That we need longer sentences. We need, you know, people's licences taken away. I want people, you know, to hold the government to account to say, when the government say they're going to help all victims of crime, they help all victims of crime, and that will include road crash victims.
And if Sarah, if people want to sign that petition, if they want to get involved, how do they go about that?
Well, the petition is coming. You'll see the petition now, and you literally need to click the link and sign it and share it. Share, because tragically, road crashes can affect anyone.
Yeah, so it's called Elizabeth Legacy of Hope. You can see the link on the bottom of the screen there.
Oh no, that's our charity.
Yes.
No, the petition is about the road crash victims.
You explain to the viewers, please, if you could.
Oh yeah, so that's the link for the that's the link to the petition for a road crash victims commissioner.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And it is, you haven't boasted very much, but I know that Pollyanna is doing incredibly well as a dancer. I work closely with your husband, Christopher.
Yeah, of course.
And he's so proud, and I'm sure you are too.
I'm proud of all my children, the way they got through.
Well, thanks for sharing your amazing story.
Thank
you.
Wow, isn't that something? You know, it's just astonishing, you know, what you learn in this game.
Absolutely.
And, you know, yesterday I had a wobbly lip about a knife crime initiative, and I've got it again, Sarah. But thanks.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's so kind of you.
Thank you. Pleasure.
OK, that's been us. That's breakfast over today. You've been amazing, Olivia, this week. Thank you very much for stepping in. Don't go anywhere, because next it's the Camilla Tomney Show, and it looks like it's going to be an absolute corker. Stick around for that.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to today, most of us seeing some further outbreaks of rain. There will be a little bit of brightness around, and for all it will be mild. So as we start Sunday, probably not too bad initially across southeastern England, some brightness here, but elsewhere rather grey with some outbreaks of rain. The rain potentially heavy in places. Going into the afternoon, best of brightness probably across eastern parts of Scotland. Southwestern England actually may also cheer up as the afternoon goes on, but quite blustery, especially down across southwestern England. Could see some coastal